Chapter 3, Departing for Cyrus's Homeland. Today, we were going to set off on our journey to Cyrus's family's territory on the border. The weather was fine, making it a perfect day for travel. Though this journey was normally supposed to take 4 days even with a carriage driven at full speed, we were told that, because we were in such a hurry, the magical ministry had lent us some very special horses. When I arrived at the agreed-upon meeting place and first saw these horses, I did get the impression that they were a little more muscular than normal. "Aren't these horses kind of brawny?" I asked Raphael. "They're a very valuable breed found only in a small part of the continent. They're reputed to be 3 times stronger than normal horses, they can run 3 times faster, and they have plenty of stamina. I've heard that, in this kingdom, only the royal family and the magical ministry own them, and they are used in times of great haste," explained Raphael. He added that these horses would get us to Cyrus's homeland in less than half the usual time. Wow! They were also lent to us in consideration of the worst-case scenario so we can swiftly flee the enemy if they show up, added Raphael. The bigwigs at the ministry thought of everything, huh? But, if these horses are so strong, why do we need 2 carriages? Well, apparently, even these horses will get seriously fatigued if they have to pull a carriage carrying 6 adults for an extended period of time. Taking 2 carriages means we will need more horses, but if we just took one big carriage that would reduce our speed anyway, which would defeat the purpose of using them. So they lent us a lot of them, said Raphael with something of a wry smile. Aren't the bigwigs generous? I said. Since this journey has come right on the heels of the incident with Miss Maria, there were apparently a number of complaints, so they had to be more thoughtful. Makes sense. My whole family was so worried about me. Yes, indeed. Raphael nodded earnestly, then gestured to the carriages. The carriages, too, are not regular carriages, but were specially made by our own magical tool laboratory, using magical tools. Oh, really? They look like regular carriages to me. The base of each carriage is fitted with a tool enchanted with wind magic, making them considerably lighter than regular carriages. That's amazing. Raphael then told me that, with the strongest horses around and these wonderful carriages, a trip that would have usually taken 4 days would be finished in about a day and a half. Wow, magical ministry, you guys really are amazing. It was decided that each carriage would seat 3 people, and I climbed into one of them. Cyrus and Sora joined me. Hey, wait, why are we grouped together? I mean, I don't mind, but Mr. Cyrus, do you think it makes sense to ride in a different carriage after going on about protecting Maria? Generally speaking. The moment we were all in the carriage, the feelings I'd been bottling up came pouring out all at once. Cyrus looked sad and Sora burst out laughing. Well, Cyrus, I mean, you really are something. When we all gathered here, you stood right in front of Maria, and what did you blurt out? I swear that I'll protect you. That was a line worthy of a romanceable character, you know? He had wowed me, but Maria, her denseness in full swing, showed no signs of swooning. Thank you very much, she'd said without missing a beat. When I'd looked at Cyrus in that moment, I'd been utterly convinced that he was about to get into the same carriage as Maria, even sit next to her, and protect her from whatever dangers might come their way. In spite of this, when the time came to decide which carriage to ride in, and which of the 2 people needing protection, in this case, me and Maria, to ride with. In that case, I'll take the same carriage as Miss Katerina, Cyrus had immediately said. Everyone had been stunned. I'm sure they all chided him emphatically inside their heads, thinking things to the effect of, after making a declaration like that, you aren't going to ride in the same carriage as Maria. But everyone seemed to be quick on the uptake. Laura, the strongest person in the magical ministry, had spoken up first. Well then, I'll ride with Maria, Laura had said, all while giving Cyrus an inscrutable look. Cyrus averted his eyes. It had then been decided that Raphael, whose magic was second strongest, after Laura's should also accompany Maria, who had fewer means of self-defense than I did to bolster her protection, and so he had climbed into the same carriage. Since I had Poki, I could look after myself. That had left Sora to come along with me and Cyrus. I had somehow ended up in a carriage with two romanceable characters introduced in Fortune Lover 2. Following this development, I couldn't help but give Cyrus a piece of my mind as soon as we were inside the carriage. Cyrus replied with a sad expression, speaking in a soft voice. "I'm just not ready to share a carriage with her yet." "You've worked with her for half a year and you're still not ready to share a carriage with her? Then when will you be ready?" That's what I wanted to say to him, but Cyrus already looked so sad that I couldn't bring myself to do so. Sora, for his part, managed not to laugh again. He restrained himself so that his lips merely twitched. That was how our journey began. At the start, because of Cyrus, the atmosphere inside the carriage was melancholic, but once the horses started galloping, we were so impressed with their speed that we all cried out in excitement. Not only were we actually going way faster than I expected, but the carriage shook less than usual, so it was very comfortable. This was peculiar, considering we were going faster than usual. Perhaps this was thanks to the wind magic. With these precious horses pulling our carriage, we made rapid progress. The scenery outside rolled by so much faster than usual, we had fun just looking out the window. To think there are horses that can gallop this fast. I guess there are still a lot of things in the world I don't know about, I remarked earnestly as I watched the scenery roll by the window. Indeed. It would seem that this is a much wider world than we thought, agreed Sora. Because Cyrus was with us, he was being polite, rather than speaking to me as he usually did. But from the way his eyes sparkled, I could tell that he meant what he said. "You're right," Cyrus said as he watched us. "Back when I first moved from the country to the royal capital, I often thought the same thing." Cyrus's family lived right on Sorcia's border, where the head of the family ruled the territory as its margrave. Although, according to Cyrus, despite bearing that impressive title, their territory was still pretty rustic, with more livestock than people. With nothing there to keep them entertained, all the young people ended up moving to the city, so there were only elderly people there, and almost no young women. This was supposedly why Cyrus had such a hard time dealing with young women. These were all details I'd heard from Cyrus while working with him on the vegetable patch he'd established on ministry grounds. By the way, Cyrus had also told me that, since I reminded him so much of the older ladies he used to do farm work with back home, he didn't feel so anxious around me. As a young woman of marriageable age, I wasn't quite sure whether to celebrate this or lament it. Notwithstanding the way Cyrus had described his family's territory, I was secretly excited to be going there. I knew that, if anyone found out how I felt about the trip, they were liable to tell me, "This is a dangerous mission that may involve dark magic. It's nothing to be getting excited about." Certainly my overly anxious adopted brother would. But I still couldn't help being excited. This was because of the food I expected to find there. Thanks to the influence of Zyerma, a Japanesque country that was just over the border from Cyrus's family's territory, their diet mostly consisted of Japanese-style food. Ever since getting to know Cyrus and learning of that fact, I'd been thinking how much I'd like to go and try it. It was only yesterday that I finally had the chance to try that very cuisine, thanks to Cyrus's childhood friend Haru, who was from Zyerma. It was the first time I was able to enjoy Japanese food since my previous life, and I'd been moved beyond words. However, we humans are greedy. Now that I'd had a taste of those nostalgic flavors, my desire to taste them again was eating away at me. With all of that on my mind, when I heard I'd be going to Cyrus's family's territory, I got a little overexcited at the thought of getting to eat Japanese-style food again, though I tried not to make it too obvious to everyone around me. "So, where roughly does the region where people eat rice and stuff begin?" I inquired of Cyrus as I peered out the carriage window. "Miss Katerina, I know you're looking forward to eating Zyerma cuisine, but we're embarking on a mission that might be dangerous." You need to brace yourself for that. I'll make sure you get to eat once we're in the right setting for it, replied Cyrus, giving me an exasperated look. Eh? How did you know I was looking forward to eating Zyrma cuisine? I thought I was doing my best to hide it. Just now, I made sure to phrase my question so it sounded like I was only asking roughly where the region where people eat rice starts. Next it was Sora, not Cyrus, who chimed in with an air of disbelief. Well, you were just muttering the names of different Zyrma dishes to yourself, weren't you? Oh, wait, don't tell me you weren't aware of it. No, I wasn't aware of it. Looks like I just blurted that out while I was thinking about Zyrma cuisine. Now my attempt to pretend I wasn't interested in it feels even more embarrassing. As my cheeks started to burn of their own accord, Sora looked at me and once again laughed with great amusement, while Cyrus chuckled quietly to himself. In that way the time passed peacefully enough, I guess, and our carriage arrived at our first rest stop. No matter how much more stamina they have than regular horses, it's not like these special horses can keep going without any rest. Our carriage ended up stopping on the outskirts of a small town, but it was there that we became aware of something that beggared belief. What are you doing here? When the normally calm Cyrus screamed this at Haru, she shuddered and frowned. The rest of us looked on from a short distance away. Now, let me rewind a bit. When we arrived at the town and were about to disembark from the carriage to get something to eat, our driver informed us that a stowaway had been riding on the back of the carriage. When he brought that person in front of us, it turned out to be Haru. Cyrus had then delivered those words of disbelief, but Haru just continued to frown and said nothing. Seeing how troubled Haru was, Maria offered a thoughtful suggestion. Excuse me, but might there not be a very good reason for this? Haru frowned even more deeply at this. I'm sorry, but I didn't have a good reason at all. I just wanted to see Cyrus one more time. I sneaked away to visit the magical ministry, but when I arrived, I saw him stepping into the carriage. I so wanted to see him again that I just jumped aboard the carriage myself, which took off so fast that I couldn't get off again. It was warm, and the carriage swayed pleasantly, so I got sleepy and ended up dozing off. And the next thing I knew, we were here. When Haru said this, everyone, including me, goggled at her. Is wanting to see someone any reason to jump on the back of a carriage? And to get stuck and end up falling asleep too? Talk about audacity. And she looked so sensitive, just like the Yamato Nadeshiko. I am only glad to hear that you were not in some sort of trouble. The lovely Maria was the first to come to her senses, but despite this gracious sentiment, Haru still hung her head remorsefully. Her actions were so at odds with her appearance, jumping on a carriage and falling asleep, all while looking like the stereotypical Japanese beauty, that I couldn't hold in my mirth any longer and burst out laughing. Sorry, Haru. Now that we've brought you this far, we can hardly turn back. As luck would have it, she happens to be the daughter of a family living in the territory right next to ours. She can accompany us until we reach my family's territory, then go straight home to her family. I'll write a letter to her brother to that effect, said Cyrus, bringing the entire discussion to an end. And so Haru ended up accompanying us on our journey to Cyrus's family's territory. Despite the manner in which she came to join us, she was so naturally personable that she immediately hit it off with everyone. Well, we're basically all friendly people here. Still, I was surprised by how quickly she adapted to Laura's striking appearance. We took a break and had a simple lunch in the little town where we had stopped. My name is Haru Kaberagi. I am the daughter of a Margrave of Zyrma. I hope we can all get along, said Haru, introducing herself once we were seated. By the way, after her explanation of why she had climbed aboard the carriage, now everyone present knew how Haru felt about Cyrus, not just Maria, Cyrus, and me, who had witnessed her previous confession. After we'd finished our light lunch, which was still Western-style saucy cuisine, and the horses were done resting, we climbed back into our carriage and set off once more for our destination. Haru got into our carriage. After all, she had already been riding on the back of the carriage, and she was Cyrus's childhood friend. Although Sora and I didn't mind at all, Cyrus himself looked a little nervous. Though Haru was his childhood friend, back then Cyrus thought she was a boy, and she was such a beautiful woman now. Sharing such a cramped space with a woman like that, it seemed he couldn't help but feel nervous. Even so, he wasn't trembling the way he did in front of Maria. So, partly to help out Cyrus, who was a bit too anxious, I struck up a cheerful conversation with Haru. Food was the main subject.
Haru.
May I ask you some questions about the food in Zyrma?
Of course you may.
I'd like to ask you about the food of Sorcy as well, if that's all right.
Yes, of course.
Please, let me tell you about my favorite dishes and restaurants.
Katarina, I just know I can count on you.
We continued in that fashion, enthusiastically telling each other what dishes and restaurants we recommended. By the way, though Sora put in a word now and then during our culinary conference, Cyrus remained silent throughout. While we were enjoying our journey, the next thing we knew the sun had set, and our carriage arrived outside our lodgings for the night. Tonight we were starting at an inn that looked to be the most expensive location in a fairly small town. Perhaps it just wasn't the right season for travel, but the inn wasn't very crowded. Therefore we were able to get enough rooms to keep 3 women, 3 men, and 1 Laura happy. Laura took a single room. If I have to share a room, people might see me without my makeup on, she offered by way of explanation. Didn't we all share a room when we took our exams? I pointed out. I would have preferred to have a room to myself that time too, but I couldn't get one. So I had to resort to all sorts of measures, like putting up partitions, and wearing an eye mask. It was a lot of work. If she's willing to go to those lengths to prevent anyone seeing her without makeup, then Laura truly is a maiden. Thoroughly so. Since we'd arrived so late, after wolfing down a light meal, still Western-style Sorcy cuisine, we all went to our respective rooms to sleep. Maria, Haru, and I stepped into the room that had been prepared for us.
Please let me know if you need anything.
I shall lend you whatever I am able to, said Maria to Haru. Now that she mentioned it, I realized that Haru had come this far with practically nothing more than the clothes on her back. I suppose that's only to be expected, since she jumped on our carriage without a second thought. Of course she wasn't ready for such a journey. That's why Maria asked if she needed anything. Maria really is sharp, and so thoughtful. I brought lots of extra outfits too, and other things as well. Would you like to borrow any of them? I offered. In my case, Anne had been sure to send a lot of extra changes of clothes with me, on the grounds that, I just thought you might get food or mud on them. But Haru just smiled. Thank you for your consideration. But ever since I was little, I've been running around fields with my older brothers. I've even fallen asleep on top of a thatched roof cottage before. So you needn't worry too much about my comfort. Even I've never fallen asleep on top of a cottage before, though it sounds like a lot of fun. Haru really is an incredible woman. How many brothers do you have? Asked Maria.
Oh, just 3, answered Haru.
3 of them. I cried out in surprise. I had 2 older brothers in my past life, and they were both so noisy and rough that they were hard to live with. That's right. With 3 brothers under one roof, they were always making noise and getting into fights, said Haru with a wry smile. This sounded so much like my family in my past life that it made me nostalgic. Which of your brothers was with you at the party? He was the youngest of my 3 older brothers. Since his age is closest to mine, we went everywhere together when we were little. Even now, he's the brother I feel closest to. So he's the brother whose age is closest to hers, and they used to go everywhere together when they were little. This is sounding more and more like my situation in my past life. The face of my brother from my past life appeared in my mind's eye. If I hadn't lost my life in that accident, I'm sure we would be grown up now, like Haru and her brother, and still the best of friends. When I thought about that, it made me feel a little melancholic. With the passage of time, the pangs of sadness I felt whenever I recalled memories from my past life had started to become more faint. I had thought that, at this point, I hardly felt them anymore, but from time to time, like now, I still felt that heartache. I wonder if a day will ever come when this pain vanishes completely. Lady Katarina, is something the matter? While I had been spacing out, Maria had been looking at me with an expression of concern. I smiled and shook my head. I'm fine, I was just spacing out a little. But don't worry about that. Haru, when did you realize that you were in love with Mr. Cyrus? To snap myself out of my sadness, and because I was extremely curious, I changed the subject to romance. Cried Haru, freezing up at this sudden demand to discuss her feelings. Huh? After seeing how you confessed your feelings in front of everyone, I thought you wouldn't mind talking about it. Is this really such a taboo subject? You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, I said hurriedly. No, it's not that, said Haru, also hurriedly. As she fidgeted, she added, you see, up till now I've never talked about this with anyone outside my family, so, well, I was just a little flustered. You talked about romance with your family. I would have thought that would be harder than talking to your friends about it, I thought, but apparently my feelings were written on my face. Our home was in the country, so there weren't many young people around and I never had any friends my age, Haru confessed sheepishly. I see. I'd heard that Cyrus lived in the country, but I guess the neighboring region where Haru lived was rural as well. I guess the few kids who did live there would have to socialize with each other. Well, if you really don't mind, I'd love to hear what your story, I said. Why? Well, despite having friends, I had never had a proper chat about romance. My friends were all incredibly beautiful women, but none of them even had a boy they liked, and seemed to have no interest in romance. This was despite the fact that, in my past life, every girl started talking about romance as soon as she went to high school, though my best friend and I had our hands full pursuing two-dimensional men, so that didn't apply to us. So, since this was going to be my first proper girl talk ever, in my past life or this life, I was just a bit excited. Haru continued to fidget, then started to speak. It all started one day when I was little. I met Cyrus when I visited Sorcy with my brother Reijou. We were both obsessed with our training in swordplay and martial arts back then, and we became friends with him thanks to that common interest. You became friends because of swordplay and martial arts / Sounds more like two friends meeting in a shonen manga. Not quite what I was expecting. Yes. We helped each other hone our skills. Cyrus was stronger every time I saw him until, one day, he was strong enough to beat a much larger adult man. I thought he was so cool. Yeah, this is starting to sound a little more romantic. I thought how much I wanted to be as strong as Cyrus. I see. That still sounds like a plot line in a shonen manga. When are we going to get to the girl talk? I was starting to worry. The next thing I knew, my heart would thump in my chest whenever I saw him. Ooh. This is finally getting romantic. Yep. That's what people mean when they talk about the heart missing a beat. So I thought I must have come down with some sort of illness. Haru had just said something so peculiar that I involuntarily made a slightly weird noise. When you felt your heart pounding, wasn't that because of your feelings for Mr. Cyrus? I inquired, giving Haru a look of skepticism. She looked sheepish again. Now I understand that was what was going on, but at the time I didn't. When I felt that sudden tightness in my chest, I thought I must have some kind of illness in that part of my body. Haru, you're beautiful, but you're hopeless. Mistaking the pounding of your heart for an illness in your chest, you're just like a dense heroine in a shoujo manga. Gasp. Come to think of it, there's another dense heroine in this very room. When I looked over at the heroine in question, I saw she was nodding as she listened to Haru. Oh? I guess that means she really is just like Haru. Good grief. It looks like everyone in this room but me is a dense heroine. Oh, if I don't get my head in the game, these two won't get anywhere with their girl talk. They're too dense. So, when did you realize how you actually felt? I asked once I'd pulled myself together. It's embarrassing to admit this, but I only finally realized how I felt when Cyrus went away to attend the Academy of Magic, and I had a tea party with some women in my neighborhood, said Haru, her cheeks turning slightly red. Then it took quite a while. Wait, so Mr. Cyrus wasn't even around when you realized? That's right. He wasn't around, but I'd heard that he would graduate from the academy after 2 years, and I meant to wait for him. But then I heard that he went straight to the magical ministry to work there, and wouldn't be coming home, so I would no longer have any chance to see him. Now that she mentioned it, I had heard that Cyrus hardly ever went home to his family, since they lived too far from the capital. If it takes 4 days each way by carriage, that's an 8-day round trip. Considering how hard Cyrus worked, I couldn't imagine him taking that much time away from his work in the first place. And even if he did visit his family, I could imagine that he would only be there very briefly. If Haru had lived in the same territory as Cyrus, he might have paid her a visit while staying with his family, but since she lived in a neighboring territory, it was that much less likely that he'd be able to find the time. So, after being unable to see him for several years, I finally decided to take action, and started attending large gatherings in Sourcey. You're his childhood friend. Didn't you think about going to see him directly? No, I felt it would be strange for someone who hadn't seen him in so many years to go and see him directly, all of a sudden. I see, the heart of a maiden sure is complicated. I dreamed of the day when I would coincidentally be reunited with Cyrus at a party. For a few years now, I've carried on attending parties like that, but I never managed to meet him. Oh yeah. Since Cyrus didn't want to be approached by young women, he's always avoided parties, claiming that he was too busy with work. Recently, I'd started to think about giving up, but at the party the other day I finally got to see him. I lost control of my emotions and ended up confessing my feelings in that way, said Haru mournfully, averting her eyes as her face turned red. Ah, so she's aware that she lost control. Well, that confession was something else. Still, I feel like this girl chat ended up being short on heart-pounding anecdotes. Is this how these chats normally go? There was just one thing I could say for certain. It's amazing how passionate you are, Haru. I think it's wonderful how you took the initiative like that, I said, praising her. Oh no, really, she replied, scratching the back of her head bashfully. Upon finally getting to meet her beloved, after attending so many parties in the hopes of a chance reunion, she had instantly confessed her love for him and took a packed lunch to his workplace the very next day. And the day after that, she jumped on the back of his carriage when she saw him about to depart. There couldn't be too many women who would go so far for their beloved. I had to applaud her passion, as well as her spirit. Despite often being accused of taking action without a second thought myself, I wasn't sure whether I could ever match Haru's admirable initiative. After blushing a bit, Haru soon straightened herself again. So, she asked us point blank, would you two happen to know the type of woman Cyrus likes? At the party, I was able to learn that he doesn't have a fiancé. Nor does he have feelings for anyone. But at that tea party I told you about, I learned that all men have a type, so I just wanted to check if you know Cyrus's type. I struggled to find the right answer to this question. Cyrus's type. That would be someone gentle, adorable, and kind, as well as being smart and good at her job, as well as being good at baking sweets. In other words, Maria Campbell and no one else. But I can't say that. In fact, maybe Cyrus should have just admitted that he had feelings for someone at the party, even if he wasn't prepared to give her name. Since he had said he had no fiancé, and denied that he had feelings for anyone, Haru certainly wasn't at fault. I thought it was only natural for a maiden who had loved someone for many years to pursue her beloved, provided he wasn't interested in someone else. Arg, what am I supposed to do in this situation? If only I had more experience in romance myself. If only Laura, who's girlier than any of us, were staying in this room. One if only after another raced through my mind as I tried to put together a response. But then Maria, a dense heroine herself, spoke up. I have never heard anything about the type of woman Mr. Cyrus prefers. My senior colleagues in my department of the ministry have speculated on that question, but have also said that Mr. Cyrus was never willing to discuss it with them. Ah, well, Cyrus does take great pains around the office not to let anyone know. He's conscientious about treating Maria the same as all his other subordinates, which is why his co-workers in his department were left with the impression that he's not interested in anyone. Take him out of the office for a minute and he'll be wearing his heart on his sleeve, but it looks like his co-workers haven't caught on just yet. Is that so? Many years ago, my brother told me that Cyrus would never discuss those matters with him, either. I guess that hasn't changed. Haru frowned and groaned as she pondered this. From what I had seen at the party, Haru's brother, Reijou, seemed to know that Cyrus had trouble dealing with women. But, perhaps because he didn't think it was appropriate to spill this secret to his younger sister, Haru seemed to know nothing about it. Maria knew that Cyrus had an aversion to young women, and that he had so far avoided discussing his type, so she might have avoided the subject herself. In that case, shall we ask him directly, said Haru, her face lighting up as she looked right at us again. She's not kidding. She's thinking of walking right up to Cyrus tomorrow morning and asking him point blank. I might not be very sharp, but even I can tell. In the worst case scenario, Cyrus would end up admitting what kind of woman he liked right in front of Maria, the woman he loved. There was a high chance of him ending up in an awkward situation. I'd sure feel sorry for him if that happened. Haru, I think that might be just a little too. It would be hard for Mr. Cyrus to describe someone different from you, now that you've confessed your feelings for him, so he might not be entirely honest, I said in order to stop her, just barely managing to come up with a plausible reason. She gasped and looked crestfallen. You're absolutely right. I was on the verge of acting without thinking again. The sight of a stereotypical Japanese beauty sadly hanging her head made me feel so sorry for her. But, since I knew too much, I could hardly give her my wholehearted support in her quest for love. Though it might be impossible to get an honest answer by asking directly, I shall see if I can find an opportunity to get him to talk about the type of woman he likes. You are a lovely woman, Haru, and Mr. Cyrus is a fine man, so I will do what I can to help, so that things go well between the two of you. While I was still fretting, Maria, that dense heroine, came out with that offer. She must have felt sorry for Haru too, when she saw her hanging her head in sorrow. It was a kind offer, just what I would have expected from her. But Maria, you're the one Cyrus loves. He loves you, and wants to make his feelings known somehow, but with a lower level of romantic experience than most elementary school boys, he's struggling. So for you to try and help Haru is just a little. Really? Thank you so much. Ah, Haru has such a nice smile. Yes, I shall do whatever I can to help, said Maria, with a lovely smile of her own. And with that, Maria ended up agreeing to help Haru pursue her love for Cyrus, and there was nothing I could do about it now. Cyrus, I'm so sorry. This is all because I wanted to have a girl chat about romance. I apologized profusely to Cyrus inside my head. I wonder what I can do to get him to talk about his type, mused Maria. It sounds like we have an early start tomorrow, so how about we get some sleep? I interjected hurriedly to cut off that line of conversation. At first, I worried that this interruption might come off as slightly unnatural, since I was the one who had brought up romance as a subject, but both Haru and Maria simply nodded. I suppose you are right. We will have an early start tomorrow, agreed Maria. We had better get some rest, said Haru. Both of them were soon tucked snugly into their beds. What good girls they are. They may be love rivals, or perhaps in a love triangle, but I still want them both to be happy, I found myself thinking. Good night, I said, and went to sleep, still wrestling with complicated feelings. Hey, Sarah, good day to you, said the man with grey eyes. I didn't respond, just averted my gaze and continued getting ready. Oh my, a little cold, aren't we? And after I rescued you from that jam, said the man with a grin. Again, I didn't react, and carried on getting ready. I don't like this flippant man. When I first met him, I did find something pleasantly familiar about his appearance, but after having spent a little more time with him, I'd realized he was flippant and irresponsible. And I came to despise him for the hint of darkness I saw in his eyes. Just like with that man who'd seen me as nothing more than a lab animal, I wanted nothing to do with this man. Oh, getting ready to go out somewhere, are we? Have you been asked to go on another mission? Despite my refusal to interact with him, the man stepped closer to me and looked down to see what I was working on. With him suddenly standing so close to me, I trembled for a moment, but tried to feign disinterest and carry on getting ready. I thought this last time as well, but it's funny to see you getting sent on a mission again, Sarah, considering how many times you've failed. When I heard this, I couldn't stop myself from looking up and glaring at the man. Touched a nerve, did I? Angry, are you? Well, you are still so young. The man laughed in amusement. Arg. I cursed myself for giving him the reaction he'd wanted. It was true that I had failed to do a good job of late, and experienced more mishaps than usual. I had noticed that myself. I felt like, ever since I'd first crossed paths with that woman Katarina Clays, I'd become confused, and had started to make more mistakes. If things keep going like this, I might not be sent on any more missions, and I might even be driven out of this place. The thought made me shudder. This time, I can't afford to fail. I shook my head to drive those thoughts from my mind, and resumed my preparations. My next destination lay inside the forest. I was going to need many things for this mission. That woman took my first creation from me, and then she broke the next 1.1 won't be enough. She might take it, or break it again. So this time, I'll make lots of them. I'll gather a lot of materials, and turn them into many powerful creations. When I looked up all of a sudden, I saw that the man had apparently already grown tired of taunting me, and was looking off into the distance with a cold stare. The morning after Haru joined us and we all stayed at the inn, we set off again right on schedule, just after sunrise. Still drowsy, I looked up at the carriage with sleepy eyes to find everyone else was already there and ready to go. In particular, Laura already had her makeup done perfectly. She was so impeccably put together that, as a woman, I wanted to learn from her. After all the same members of our group from yesterday had boarded the carriage again, we set off. Haru was now completely unreserved with us, maybe owing to our girl talk the previous night. And, just like yesterday, we got excited when it came to the topic of food. The cuisine of Zairma that Haru described to me really was exactly like the food of Japan, from my past life. Talking about various dishes brought back so many memories, and I really wanted to eat them. Can we hurry up and get to the region where people eat Japanese food already? Haru also seemed deeply curious about Sorcie's cuisine. I simply must try that too, she said of one dish after another, her eyes sparkling. Before long, around noon, we arrived at the territory belonging to Cyrus's family, still right on schedule. This is the land managed by my family, the territory of Victoire, said Cyrus as he gazed outside the window. I turned to look out the window as well. Out the window I saw grassy plains that seemed to go on forever. Yep, just like the terrain we've been traveling through this whole time. So where does Cyrus's family's territory start? Honestly, it's been the same scenery of a tranquil countryside for the past few hours. The only time it changed was when we were looking at grassy plains instead of farms. And here, all I see is nature, all around us. When Cyrus said his family's territory was pretty rural, I guess he wasn't just being modest. It's so rural, the region we visited for our ministry entrance exam was like the middle of the city by comparison. In my past life, my grandmother had a saying, city folks think that if a place has only one bus come by per hour, it's in the countryside, but the real countryside doesn't have buses at all. If you want to ride the bus, you need to drive your car to the bus stop first. In other words, in the real countryside, there's nothing whatsoever. I'm glad that we seem to have made it to Cyrus's homeland, but where do we go now? I asked. The country roads weren't well paved, but thanks to our precious horses and high-tech carriage, we were still proceeding smoothly. Still, no matter where we went, there was nothing around, so I was starting to feel uneasy. We're heading to the largest town in this territory. That's where the local branch of the magical ministry is, explained Cyrus. Wow, so there's a big town around here? I'd thought we were way out in the middle of nowhere, but after hearing there was a town I felt slightly relieved. After our carriage made some more progress, the grassy plains gave way to fields. Here and there, I even saw people out in the fields. On nearly every farm, I saw elderly people with scarves around their heads out in the fields, staring back at our carriage. Is it just me, or are they looking really intently at us? As I gazed out the window, my eyes met those of every grandpa and grandma we passed. It was a little awkward. Well, they've never seen this carriage before, so they're probably curious. They're familiar with most of the carriages that pass through here, explained Cyrus. This made sense to me. In the countryside I knew in my past life, everyone pretty much knew everyone else, so anyone unfamiliar became the center of attention. After we traveled a little further and I continued to exchange looks with grandpas and grandmas now and then, we finally started to see what looked like buildings. So that's the biggest town in these parts? I asked. Yeah, that's right, said Cyrus, smiling slightly and half closing his eyes. He must have been happy to visit his hometown for the first time in a while. I looked out the window at the street. So this is the region's largest settlement, huh? This might sound rude, but as someone brought up in the city, this is way smaller than what I was imagining. Also, even after we entered the town proper, everyone we saw walking around was elderly, with barely a glimpse of anyone younger. So, even in this world, young people are leaving the countryside. While I was mulling these matters over, our carriage stopped, apparently having reached our destination. Maria's group, who had been traveling ahead of us and arrived a little sooner, had already disembarked and started filing into the local ministry branch. We all stepped out of our own carriage. The building in front of us looked quite a bit bigger than the branch where we'd gone to get rid of raccoon dogs. It's bigger than the last branch we visited, isn't it? I said to Sora. Cyrus must have heard me, since he responded. This serves as the headquarters for a number of even smaller branches in the region, so they had to make it a little bigger. So that branch we were sent to get rid of raccoon dogs was that sort of smaller regional office? That explains why there were old men and ladies there having tea, just like the town halls I remember from my past life. I guess they do things the same way in this region. As we stepped into the building after Maria's group, I noticed an old lady with a cane staring right at us. What could she want? I wondered. She spoke up almost instantly, blinking in surprise. Oh my, don't tell me you're Lord Lancaster's youngest son. Lord Lancaster's youngest son? Does she mean Cyrus? When I turned to look at him, his face showed that he felt he'd slipped up. But he soon snapped back to attention and addressed the old lady with his usual smart expression. That's right. It has certainly been a while. The old lady then approached us so quickly that I wondered whether she really needed that cane after all. My, she said in admiration. What a fine young man you've grown up to be. And I hear you've been doing a fine job at the ministry's offices in the capital. Old ladies talk a lot. I'm sure this one was just happy to see someone she knew when he was as a little boy return after growing up into a respectable young man, but the fact remains that old ladies like this one always talk a lot when they get going. The old lady who lived next door to us in my past life was just like that. Once she got her hands on you, she wouldn't let you go for at least 30 minutes. I could already tell this was just such a case. With a strained smile on his face, Cyrus searched for a way of escape, but there was no stopping this old lady once she started talking. I was anxious to follow Maria's group into the branch office, but I couldn't just abandon Cyrus there. What should I do? Ah, Cyrus, good to see you made it here safely. Now ma'am, Cyrus has some urgent business to attend to, so let me just borrow him. A young man with a big smile suddenly appeared, grabbed Cyrus by the arm and smoothly escorted him inside the building. The rest of us hurried after them. Inside, the building wasn't much different than the ministry branch office we'd visited before, but it was much bigger, with more people working there. Of course, there weren't any old men or ladies having tea. I guess the regional headquarters isn't exactly like the smaller branch offices. I intoned to myself as I looked at my surroundings. Then, Cyrus spoke up beside me. Thanks. You saved me, he said to the smiling young man. No, the young man replied without letting his smile falter. I know you couldn't have gotten away from that old granny. Every time I've seen her catch you before, you ended up stuck for a long time. I've never seen you get away. Do you two know each other? I inquired. Cyrus nodded. This is Tyler. He was one of my friends around here when I was a kid, and now works at this branch of the ministry. I'm Tyler Wise. Nice to meet you all, said Tyler with a big smile. We all introduced ourselves as well. I'm Katarina Clays. Pleased to meet you. I'm Sora Smith. Nice to meet you. I'm Haru Kabaragi. Nice to meet you. Though Tyler's smile never faltered when Sora and I introduced ourselves, when he heard Haru's name he looked puzzled. From the sound of your name, may I take it that you hail from Zyrma? In that case, you must not be an employee of the magical ministry. Am I right? Yes, Haru responded, I am from Zyrma. And no, I am not an employee of the magical ministry. You see, well, I acted without really thinking and found myself unable to make my way back home. So my friends ended up bringing me here with them. She then indicated that she would like to send word to her home in Zyrma. Tyler accepted this request graciously. Then, after leaving Haru in the care of another employee, Tyler showed us to a door far back in the left wing of the building. Your colleagues who arrived earlier are waiting inside. Please, go on in, he said, and we all stepped inside. Inside was a large table with a number of tables arranged around it, making the room look like a meeting room. Maria, Laura, and Raphael were all seated, awaiting our arrival. Why, you're all a bit late. Your carriage was right behind us when we arrived, wasn't it? Did you run into some kind of trouble? Asked Laura, looking at us with a quizzical expression. After we got out of the carriage, I ran into a lady who knew me when I was a boy, said Cyrus with a weary expression. The ever-perceptive Laura seemed to grasp the series of events from that explanation alone. Well, when someone like that strikes up a conversation with you, it can end up being quite long, she said with a pitying glance at Cyrus. What happened to Haru? Maria asked. She's just arranging to have someone contact her family. Besides, we can't have someone from outside the ministry hearing the details of the work we're here to do, Cyrus answered. And he was completely right. This is ministry business and it might involve dark magic, the very existence of which is top secret. We can't let Haru hear what kind of work we're doing. Everyone else seemed to feel the same. I suppose not, agreed Maria, and everyone else nodded. It looks like the local officer in charge of the case will be coming to explain it to us very soon, said Raphael. Apparently we might be waiting in this meeting room for a while. But you know, this place really is just as rural as Mr. Cyrus said it would be. When I saw nothing around us besides farms and fields, no matter how far our carriage traveled, I was shocked. And I ended up catching the eye of a lot of the old men and ladies working in the fields, which was awkward, said Laura, echoing my impression of the region almost exactly. Just as Cyrus was explaining the reason for all the stares we got like he'd explained to me earlier, there was a knock at the door and Tyler, the young man we'd met earlier, came into the room. Sorry to keep you waiting. I am Tyler Wise, the manager of this branch. I look forward to working with you, he said with the same smile he'd been sporting earlier. Wow, so Tyler is the manager of this branch? In other words, the most important person here. I'm surprised. Sora looked just as shocked as me, but Cyrus just murmured, like he'd known all along. A plump, elderly woman appeared from behind Tyler carrying a tray, then she began to speedily hand out cups of tea. While I was marveling at the efficiency with which she performed this task, she smiled. Please take one of these to accompany your tea. She then placed a wooden box full of snacks like one I remembered my grandma in my past life having in her house near the center of the table, but slightly nearer to me than anyone else. Thank you very much, I said. Just let me know if you'd like another helping, she said with a smile before exiting the room. I immediately turned my attention to the contents of that box of snacks. The first thing that caught my eye were the rice crackers, nostalgic, tasty-looking crackers that were faintly brown in color. It was my first time seeing them in this life. The next item I noticed were some sort of white blobs, shaped like flowers. Could it be? Are these those sweets made of hardened sugar or something? Just like those sweets my grandma in my past life used to eat often? The extremely sweet ones. Finally, I've arrived in the region where people eat Japanese cuisine. Here I'll get to eat Japanese dishes, Japanese food. When he saw how excited I was getting, Sora tapped me on the shoulder. I know you're excited about the snacks, he said in a soft voice, but calm down a little. I gasped and looked around to find that everyone seemed to be giving me the same look my grandma used to give me in my past life. They were watching me get entranced by the snacks. How embarrassing. I'm sorry. I'll try the snacks later, I said, bowing my head apologetically. Tyler chuckled. Well, then, let me outline the case we'll be dealing with. First of all, it appears that a number of animals have come out of the forest and have started damaging crops in the region. However, this sort of thing happens naturally from time to time, so the farmers did not regard it as particularly unusual at first and employed their usual pest control methods to keep out the animals. But eventually, once it became clear that the number of animals was out of the ordinary, some farmers came to the ministry in a panic to report the matter. I see, said Cyrus, nodding along. This reminds me of something that the ministry circulated to me previously. Something the ministry told you? I blurted out. After that incident you encountered during your exam, he explained, a memo was circulated instructing the staff at every branch to contact the ministry's head office if similar events occurred in their region, since the situation could become dangerous. Has that incident we were involved in really become that famous? Our circumstances resembled those described by the head office quite strongly, so I contacted your managers immediately, said Tyler. So after they got Tyler's report, our managers called us? Still, I didn't imagine you'd get here so quickly. I'm very grateful, said Tyler. The ministry lent us special horses and a special carriage, said Cyrus. Aha! I didn't think those horses belonged to any normal breed, Tyler replied with a twinkle in his eye. I've never seen horses like them. And the carriage is of a special make too, is it? Yeah, it was specially made by the Magical Tool Laboratory. That's incredible. Tyler suddenly gasped and said, Excuse me. Cyrus and I were childhood friends, so we started chatting just like old times. This explanation of his relationship with Cyrus was for the benefit of Laura, Raphael, and Maria. Unlike Sora and I, they hadn't already been made aware of those circumstances, so they were shocked at first by the ease with which the two men had been chatting. Now their expressions turned to ones of comprehension. I was just a little older than Cyrus, but there weren't many kids around these parts, so we played together all the time, said Tyler. And so, Cyrus added, after Tyler went to work at the ministry first, I decided to walk the same path. Tyler used to work in the central offices too, but then he decided that his hometown suited him better and arranged a transfer back here. That's right. Personally, the relaxed way of life in the country suits me better than glamorous city life, so I came back, said Tyler with a smile. But we're way off topic. Getting back to the matter of the disturbance, having hurried to get in contact with the ministry's head office, I went to the scene to confirm the situation myself. Just as I had been told, an unprecedented number of animals had come down into the fields. You've said that the animals came from the forest, but what species did you observe? Were most of them small mammals? Asked Cyrus. Raccoon dogs and foxes often come down from the forest, but this time there were larger mammals like boars and bears. I was so struck by their numbers that a chill went down my spine. Then, when I went to look at the forest, I was horrified to see how few animals were left there. That's when I judged the situation to be deadly serious and told the head office to hurry. Our higher UPS did hurry us along, saying there was no time to lose, noted Cyrus. Still, I didn't think you'd get here this fast. As a rule, the higher UPS aren't very quick to act, but I knew we'd be in trouble if we ended up waiting several weeks, said Tyler, frowning slightly. So, you mean to say the situation is ongoing? In that case, we'd better get there on the double, said Cyrus, leaning forward so energetically that he really seemed to intend to get to the scene right away. No, as I just said, I never thought you'd get here this quickly, so there's no need to be in such a hurry. After I contacted the head office, I anticipated that it would take at least 4 days for help to arrive, so I've already taken many measures myself to keep the damage to a minimum. The situation is still pretty much as I first reported it. Though we can't exactly put our feet up, there's at least enough time for you to set down your luggage and have lunch first, said Tyler, calming Cyrus down as he was about to stand up. At that very moment, my stomach started to rumble. Tyler blinked in surprise, then laughed. Seems like you really do need lunch. Seems that way, agreed Cyrus. Since we departed from the inn early that morning, we had also eaten an early breakfast, and now my stomach had clearly reached its limit. It was always so honest. In that case, we'll go to our lodgings to put our bags down and get something to eat there. Tyler, which inn have you prepared for us? Inquired Cyrus. Tyler looked puzzled. What? I haven't prepared any inn for you. Since you're back in your hometown, I assumed you'd just stay with your family. Besides, they have plenty of spare rooms. I already contacted your mother to let her know you were coming here with your colleagues, and asked her to let you all stay there. What were you thinkin'? This ain't my homecoming. I'm here for work, said Cyrus in quite a forceful tone, his eyes wide. He was so shaken that his country accent even showed through. I just told you, I made it clear that you were coming here for work. That's not what I mean. I'm askin' why I should stay with my family at all when I'm here for work. Ain't that a little strange, taking my subordinates home with me? For a normal family, maybe it would be true, but your family's house is huge, right? So it's fine. When the bigwigs from the head office visit here, which admittedly is quite rare, they stay with your family. And besides, there are no inns out here in the sticks where glitzy city folk like your group could stay for days on end. Just stay with your family, there's a good lad, said Tyler. Cyrus seemed to give in. Though he still wore an expression of displeasure, he nodded reluctantly. All right. And so it was that we ended up going to Cyrus's family home, which was the manor of the lord of the territory. By the way, I got them to wrap up that box of snacks for me first. How thoughtful of them, I marveled to myself. Sora gave me an exasperated look. After seeing how hungrily you were staring at them, I think anyone would have given you a share. I hadn't meant to look at them so hungrily, but having received some rice crackers and sugar candies I was very satisfied. I wanted to eat them right away, but... Eat them later, you'll spoil your lunch, said Sora. I struggled to restrain myself. By the time we had finished talking to Tyler, Haru had managed to contact her family. For the time being, she would accompany us to Cyrus's family home. Since she was already acquainted with his family, it was decided that she would wait for her transport home there. The letter Cyrus sent to Haru's older brother the previous day had apparently arrived. Judging from his response, Reijou was angry, and Haru came back in a sulk. The thought of seeing my brother makes me feel gloomy, she muttered. As our group climbed back into our carriage and headed straight to the Lord's manor, Cyrus's face was also gloomy. Is it really so terrible for him to have to stay with his family? I can't imagine the Lord's manor is all that shabby. Or is his family just too quirky? Maybe they're all too affectionate, like my father, and he's just embarrassed? Mr. Cyrus, what is your family like? I inquired while Cyrus was still looking downcast. He pondered my question for a moment. My older brother has already taken over the duties of the household head from my father, who's retired. I hear my father still assists him, though. My brother is married with 2 sons. Ooh, if his brother is married, I guess that means he doesn't have trouble handling women. And if his brother has 2 sons, that means... So you have 2 nephews, Mr. Cyrus? Are they still little? No, my brother's quite a lot older than me, so in a few more years, my nephews will be old enough to attend the Academy of Magic. So they're pretty much all grown up. I see, so his brother's a lot older than him. Then does that mean his brother's wife isn't that young either? If so, does that mean she wouldn't trigger his complex? Actually, I should ask. You told me before that there aren't many young women around these parts. So where is your brother's wife from? He did say there were hardly any young women in the country, so there wouldn't have been enough brides to go around. My brother met his wife at the academy, and got engaged to her before coming home. She was a slender young noblewoman when she arrived, but now she's a hard worker and spends most of her days in the field with my brother. Cyrus had a slightly wistful look in his eye. I guess even a delicate young noblewoman has to toughen up after moving to the countryside. Now, if Cyrus's brother snagged himself a wife while he was still at the academy, he must be a lot more assertive than Cyrus. I wonder. Mr. Cyrus, did your mother come to marry your father in much the same way? When I asked him this question, Cyrus clammed up at first. He answered everything else smoothly enough. Was that an odd question? As Cyrus remained silent, Haru, sitting with us, spoke up in his place. Cyrus's mother fell for his father while they were at the academy together. She made quite a bold approach, came back to the country with him, and they married. She often spoke about it herself. Haru was smiling, but Cyrus's expression seemed more conflicted. Though the stuffy nobles in the kingdom's interior may speak ill of a woman who chases after the man she loves, I thought it was wonderful, and Haru seemed to agree with me. But perhaps Mrs. Lanchester's son feels more conflicted about it. Just like Haru says, my mother was very pushy, assertive, and impulsive. She's something of a busybody and very quirky, so prepare yourselves, said Cyrus with a troubled expression. It sounds like he's more concerned with his mother's quirks than the fact that she approached his father so aggressively. So she's pushy, assertive, and impulsive. I found myself looking sideways at Haru. I guess that means his mother is like Haru. As I was wondering about that, our swift carriage soon arrived at its destination. After we passed through the gates, then through a courtyard, we found a large manor standing up ahead. So this is the Margrave's manor? For this leg of the journey, our carriage had taken the lead. We arrived in front of the manor first and disembarked. No sooner had we done so than a woman of small stature ran over to greet us. She looks younger than my mother, so maybe she's his brother's wife? Just as I was thinking that. Welcome home, Cyrus. To my surprise, the woman ran straight into Cyrus's arms and embraced him. We all goggled at them. Is that really any way for his brother's wife to greet him? Or maybe it's okay, since they're family? You may be all grown up, but since you never come back to visit, I've worried about you. Have you been eating properly? You haven't gotten hurt, have you? Are you doing a good job at work? As the woman bombarded him with questions, Cyrus frowned. Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. Cut it out, he said sharply. Huh? Phew. This woman, who looks younger than my mother. You're his mom. I cried out suddenly. Cyrus's mother smiled and bowed. Yes, I'm his mother. Thank you for taking care of my son. No, he's always taking care of me, I replied hurriedly. My, aren't you adorable? Her smile is a good bit more adorable than mine. As far as I can see, she's not nearly old enough to have a child Cyrus's age. Wait, he has an older brother too. Then just how old is she? She's still so gorgeous. In my past life everyone would have been asking what her secret was. Oh, if it isn't Haru? It's been a while, called out Cyrus's mysteriously gorgeous mother once she noticed Haru. Cyrus cried out, clearly shocked. Mom, how did you know it was Haru? How did I know? She used to come and play with you all the time when you were little, so of course I recognize her. What, didn't you recognize her? Said Cyrus's mother, staring at him with a puzzled look on her face. Then, with a look of disbelief she added, but you are so very dense. You don't get that from me. That's right. Cyrus always mistook Haru for a boy, so when she appeared in front of him dressed like a woman he had no idea who she was. Looks like his mother saw right through him. I'm sorry that my son is such a blockhead. But Haru, what brings you here today? Asked Cyrus's mother. Haru gave her much the same explanation she had just given at the ministry branch office. I acted without really thinking and found myself unable to make my way back home. So my friends ended up bringing me here with them. I have sent word to my family, and I think someone will come to pick me up tomorrow, but would it be all right if I stayed here until then? At first Cyrus's mother looked a little confused, probably wondering what it was that Haru had done so thoughtlessly as to end up in this situation, but after considering Haru's explanation, she responded. Yes, of course you can. Come in and make yourself at home. The more the merrier, right? Oh, now I'm getting excited. And she did sound excited. Yep, looks like she's just as forceful as Cyrus said. Once Maria's group arrived a short while later, it was their turn to meet Cyrus's mother and look just as shocked as we did. I get it. I was surprised too. However, hardly anyone seemed to pay particular attention to Laura's eye-catching outfit, nor did they seem shocked. I remembered having the same impression the last time we visited the country. Perhaps people here just think everyone from the city is a little eccentric. Rather, I felt like their attention was focused on Maria, Haru, and me, probably since young women were so rare in those parts. Well then, let me show you to your rooms, said Cyrus's mother before guiding us into the manor. Inside, the layout of the manor seemed quite similar to Clay's manor. Only, there weren't as many decorations, and what items there were all appeared to have a practical purpose, rather than being purely ornamental. I did see some servants in the halls, and they all seemed friendly. In this respect, they were unlike the servants in the royal capital, who acted serious and always snapped to attention the moment they sensed you looking their way. I'll have the servants carry your luggage to your rooms, so please just make sure they aren't mixed up. After that, we've been making preparations to have lunch in the dining hall, so please join us once it's ready. The lord of the manor will greet you there, said Cyrus's mother. After the servants picked up our luggage, she showed each of us to our rooms. Since we would be staying in a lord's manor, there were a lot of spare rooms, so tonight we'd each have a room to ourselves. Though my room wasn't quite as large as the one I'd have in the palace or at home in Clay's manor, it was still comfortable and looked lovely. After I confirmed that I still had all the luggage that Anne and I had packed, one of the servants showed me to the dining hall. I was starving by that point, and I just couldn't wait to eat more Japanese food. Suppressing the urge to skip on my way there, I walked to the dining hall in a ladylike manner. When I got there, I realized I'd arrived first, probably because my excitement had propelled me forward. Only, though I was the first member of my party to arrive, there were a couple of people who looked like they might be members of Cyrus's family. As I walked cheerfully into the room, those people rose out of their chairs. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I am Cyrus's brother and the Margrave of Victoire," Cyrus's brother said by way of greeting. His face was similar to Cyrus's, but he seemed more mild-mannered. The woman next to him also introduced herself. She was Cyrus's sister-in-law. Though Cyrus had described her as originally being a slender young noblewoman, her skin was deeply tanned and she seemed quite plump. She really looked like a mom. "My name is Katerina Clays. I work for the Magical Ministry. Mr. Cyrus takes very good care of us," I said, introducing myself. But apparently, Cyrus's brother had already heard of me. "Ah, so you're Duke Clays's daughter," he said with a smile. "Eh? You know who I am?" I asked, accidentally making a noise that was unbecoming of a noblewoman. Indeed. When the daughter of a duke, and a prince's fiancée, went to work at the ministry, it became the topic of a great deal of conversation, he answered. Though I knew that a lot of people had talked about my decision to join the ministry, I hadn't imagined that news of it would have reached the borderlands. "What's your work at the ministry like?" he asked. "It's enjoyable and fulfilling," I answered. During our exchange, the rest of our party of travelers filed into the dining hall, each of them introducing themselves to Cyrus's brother and his wife. Cyrus's brother greeted everyone with a smile. But then Cyrus himself finally entered the room with his mother, a weary expression on his face. "I'm sure you're busy with your work, so I'm not about to ask you to come and visit often, but could you at least write a letter once in a while?" said Cyrus's brother. These were truly brotherly words of admonishment. "Sorry," said Cyrus, looking dejected. I felt like I had gotten to see something rare. We were told that Cyrus's father and his nephews had gone out. Now that he's retired, my husband seems to enjoy taking his grandsons out to play. Whenever he has some time off, he's always taking them somewhere, said Cyrus's mother with delight. Then, finally, my long-awaited Japanese meal was brought to the table. It would be my first time eating Japanese-style food since Haru brought that packed lunch to the office. My excitement was maxed out. Every plate set down in front of me had a familiar dish on it. There was tempura, grilled fish, and savory steamed custard. One dish after another that just screamed Japanese was beautifully plated up in front of me. It strongly resembled a meal I could remember being served once in my past life, when I was taken to a high-end hot spring inn. There were some ingredients I didn't quite recognize, but they were all presented beautifully. They looked really tasty. Just seeing them was making me start to drool. In our region, we typically eat food similar to what they eat in the neighboring country of Zyrma. I expect that many of these dishes will be unfamiliar to those of you from the royal capital, but please, help yourselves, said Cyrus's brother. This was all the encouragement I needed to reach for some food. Though they had knives, forks, and spoons which were what we usually used in Sorcy, they had also laid out chopsticks, and those were what I reached for. I'd heard from Cyrus that chopsticks existed in this world, but this was my first time holding them. I was so happy. Since it was my first time using them since my past life, at first I was worried that I might not be able to use them properly. But, to my surprise, they fit in my hand naturally and I had no trouble using them. First of all, I used my chopsticks to grab some of what looked like a stew from a black dish right in front of me and shoved it in my mouth. That's a steaming chunk of tuber. From the texture, I'm guessing it's taro. Stewed taro root. The flavor from the stew had really soaked into the vegetable. It was delicious. After that, I grabbed a piece of vegetable cut into the shape of a flower. Ah! From the flavor, this must be a yam. So, they cut yams into flowers. This had been seasoned with sweet and salty flavors, and was also delicious. Next was the tempura. What should I try first? Okay, let's go with this one that looks like lotus root. Ooh, the coating and the inside is so crispy. It's really yummy. Next I'll try some of this grilled fish. Could it be miso grilled fish? What a nostalgic flavor. Yum. And so I went from dish to dish, enjoying each of the foods on offer. I was so overcome by the nostalgia, as well as how tasty it all was, that I ended up with a very full stomach. Thank you for the meal, I said after wolfing down the fruit salad they brought for dessert. Everyone seemed to look at me with warmth in their eyes. I couldn't be happier to see you enjoying our food so much. And you handled your chopsticks perfectly. Could it be that you have eaten Zyrma cuisine before? Asked Cyrus's brother with a smile. Ah! Right, people living in the royal capital don't tend to eat Zyrma cuisine, and they can't use chopsticks very well either. After I recalled how I used to eat back in Japan in my past life, I used them like it was no big deal. But, no matter how much of a screw-up I am, I'm still the daughter of a duke. I'm a woman of high standing. Well, I have been served it a number of times in the past, I responded. He seemed to take my response in stride, probably thinking that the daughters of wealthy men probably must get to try foreign cuisines from time to time. I hadn't told Cyrus or Haru that I'd never eaten it before, so I was safe for now. Still, this really is more delicious than anything I've eaten before, I added. It was totally on par with that high-end hot spring inn. After I praised the food, Cyrus's brother and his wife were all smiles. I'm so glad to hear that, said Cyrus's brother. Now, after enjoying that food, it was finally time for us to head to the scene of the disturbance, where the animals had all gathered. Since this was ministry business, and might be dangerous, Haru waited back at the Margrave's manor while the rest of us headed to the scene by carriage. Haru had a lonesome look as she waved goodbye to us, but we didn't have much choice. Although we were only going to be away for a short while, Cyrus's mother handed me some snacks. Eat this if you get hungry at work, she said. I accepted them gratefully, but her son Cyrus looked conflicted. That woman thinks we're here to have fun, he muttered. The snacks were, of course, Japanese in style, and even though I'd just had so much to eat, I wanted to eat them right away. But while I was eyeing the snacks, Sora stopped me. You already ate a lot at lunch. If you eat any more, you'll have an upset stomach again. Give it a rest for now. I felt like Sora was steadily becoming more like Mother Keith. Since our special carriages were so fast, we soon arrived at our destination. We had come to a large field right next to the forest. It was a splendid field, but just like we'd been told, it had been thoroughly disturbed by animal tracks. This is just like the ruined field we found on our exam mission. No, it's even worse. I bet it'll be impossible to harvest any crops with the field in this condition. There was even a raccoon dog peeking out at us from behind the fence. It ran away as soon as it saw us, but I was sure it would be back. When Tyler said he'd taken some measures, maybe he was talking about this fence. There was a tall fence separating the field from the forest. A few people were standing in the field. We learned that they were local farmers and ministry staff. The branch manager will be here soon, said one of the staff members. And, just as he said, Tyler arrived a short while later. "I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting," said Tyler. "It looked like our carriages really were too fast." We learned that Tyler had gotten in a carriage right behind us and tried to catch up, but kept falling further and further behind. After 2 days of travel, we'd finally got used to our specially made carriages, but this reminded us that they boasted twice the speed of a normal carriage. Once he'd arrived, Tyler explained the situation in more detail, including the countermeasures taken by the farmers since the disturbance began, a rough estimate of the number of animals, and what species were present. Now that's what I'd expect from the branch manager of the regional headquarters. He was quite different from the more casual branch manager I'd met on that previous mission. Just like I'd thought, the tall fence was one of the recent countermeasures. Tyler said they were still putting up more fences around the perimeter of the forest. As a result, the number of animals coming out of the forest had been reduced a little, but there were many still crowded along the other side of the fence. Something still needed to be done about them. In the spots where there were a lot of birds, there were nets around the trees, and to deal with burrowing animals they had driven the fence posts deep into the ground, which meant they couldn't get past easily. I sensed how serious the farmers were about these measures. Then, after following Tyler's lead and taking a look around the field, next it was time for us to check the adjacent forest. Although it was right next to the field, it was totally shut off by the fence. "How do we get in?" I asked. "There's a gate just a short walk away," said Tyler, before leading us there. At a glance, the gate didn't look any different than the rest of the fence, but it did open when you pulled on it. They'd apparently designed it that way to keep the animals from finding it. It sounded like the animals were cleverer than I'd thought. After passing through the gate, I looked ahead to see nothing but forest. It was big enough that I couldn't tell how far it stretched, not that I could see very far anyway. Some forests were so densely wooded that an eerie air seemed to hang over them, but this was nothing like that. It was refreshing. The dappled light on the forest floor was very pretty and I thought it would be great for a therapeutic walk. The farmers from the surrounding fields patrol the forest, so even children can come here alone without much risk of getting lost or injured, explained Tyler. "To stop children getting lost," I murmured, remembering the last mission where I had to enter a forest. While we were all searching that forest, there was one person who got lost. "You thought about Mr. Hart just now, didn't you?" said Sora in a low voice, seeing the far-off look in my eyes. "Well, how could I not under the circumstances? That was a real pickle. Yet, if we didn't have that teddy bear, I don't know how we would have found him." The teddy bear Sora was referring to was a special one, a magical tool made to search for missing people, which could also move of its own volition. The bear in question always behaved himself when Maria was around, but he was actually a jerk. He was always treating me like an idiot, and I considered him my nemesis. Though, he really did save our necks on that mission. By the way, on this trip, I'd already checked with Maria 3 times to make sure he hadn't come along. "Are you talking about my darling Alexander?" asked Maria, clearly having overheard our conversation. Alexander was that teddy bear's name. Larna, his creator, had given him that name, but since it didn't really suit him, hardly anyone besides Maria used it. Yet, we were just talking about how he saved us during the mission we were given for our exams, I explained. This seemed to remind Maria of that time Mr. Hart got lost. "Ah, yes. It was thanks to him that we managed to find Mr. Hart when he got lost. We were just lucky that Mr. Hart treasured that towel Miss Larna gave him, and took it with him on that trip." "Right. If Mr. Hart hadn't treasured that towel Miss Larna gave him and taken it with him on that trip." "Wait, what are you talking about?" At first, I just went with the flow and agreed with what Maria had said, but in the middle I realized I didn't know what she was talking about and was taken aback. Maria also looked surprised. "Well, that time when we rescued Frey, she was carrying a specially embroidered handkerchief that Miss Larna had given her, it reminded me that Mr. Hart was carrying that towel with him on that mission," said Maria. "Ah. Come to think of it, during our mission to rescue Frey, Maria did say something about coming to a realization after seeing the handkerchief. I had a lot on my mind then, and I wasn't really listening. Sorry, Maria. Sorry, Maria. I wasn't really listening at the time," I apologized. "Oh, no problem at all," said Maria, before continuing to explain. Apparently, Maria had an opportunity to speak to Larna after we rescued Frey. When she asked her about the embroidery, she explained that she was always losing things, so this was embroidered with a special thread that meant it would come back to her more easily. But Larna wasn't that attached to her possessions, so she would quite often give them away to other people. There were now quite a few people in the department who had some small embroidered item of Larna's. Our senior colleagues were always saying how grateful they were to Larna for dragging them into her department. Since he kept that treasured item close to him, and as Mr. Hart's magic is so strong, we were lucky enough to be able to find him. "Thank goodness," said Maria with a smile. "That's right. Thank goodness that Mr. Hart had that treasured item with him, and since his magic was so strong, we managed to find him, huh? Wait a minute. I still feel like I'm forgetting something. Lady Katarina," cried Maria suddenly, grabbing me by the arm. Her tone was harsh, even though she had been smiling the whole time we were talking. When I turned to look at her, I saw her face was pale. "That means... Can you sense dark magic?" I inquired in a low voice, so as not to give our secret away to anyone from the ministry who hadn't been briefed. Maria nodded silently. Sora, who had been standing by my side, stepped in front of us to protect us, and surveyed our surroundings. Since Maria was also staring intently into the forest, I took it upon myself to call out to Cyrus, who was walking up ahead. "Mr. Cyrus." Once I had his attention, I reported that Maria had detected the presence of dark magic. "Maria, what kind of presence was it?" asked Cyrus. "I can sense a trail leading deeper into the forest." "I see." After this exchange, Cyrus went to tell the other ministry staff, excluding those of us who'd come from head office, that they would have to return to the field. He added that there could be danger lying ahead. Only Tyler objected. "You're not familiar with the forest. What if something happened to you? As the one responsible for this mission, at least let me come with you," said Tyler. But Cyrus rejected his offer. "I know the forest well, I've been playing here since I was a kid. Don't worry, I promise I'll be back before sunset." "If you're not back before sunset, I'll come to look for you," said Tyler, nodding reluctantly. And so we followed the trail of dark magic Maria had detected deep into the forest. Once again, Sora and I couldn't detect the traces of dark magic that Maria could sense. Whether this was because we were both dark magic users and Maria was a light magic user, or because Maria's magic was just that much stronger, we didn't know. Following the trail of dark magic, we proceeded deeper into the forest. This part of the forest was not so well maintained as the perimeter, and it started to get a little gloomy. Also, though we had noticed this as soon as we entered the forest, we couldn't hear any animals. The same thing was true on our last mission of this sort, we couldn't hear any of the sounds one would usually hear, like birds chirping. This made the steadily deepening darkness in the heart of the forest that much creepier. All we could hear in the gloomy forest was the howling of the wind. We didn't know how far we had walked, but we eventually spotted something that looked like a tiny hill, about the size of a small shed. "Huh, what's that? A shed? No, some kind of hill?" I thought to myself. When I got closer and realized what it actually was, I was left at a loss for words. "Whoa," I heard Sora cry next to me. Someone else gasped. I probably gasped myself, without even realizing it. What had left everyone speechless turned out to be a pile of motionless animals left in a heap, looking like a small hill. At first, I thought they might just be unconscious, but when I got a little closer I saw their wide open, empty eyes and realized they were no longer living. None of the animals appeared to have been wounded, and there wasn't any blood. They just lay there, having expired with their eyes wide open. It was so creepy that I felt a chill go down my spine. "There are strong traces of dark magic on these poor things," said Maria, grimacing as she looked at the animal corpses. "They must have been killed by dark magic." "There's no sign of any external injuries," said Laura, stepping closer to the dead animals. Raphael followed and took a look himself. I felt like I should take a closer look myself, and was about to follow suit, but my legs wouldn't move. "They really don't have any injuries," said Sora, inspecting a dead rabbit. Raphael peered at a dead raccoon dog and agreed. "This one doesn't have any either. I guess they really were killed using dark magic. But are there any dark magic spells that can be used to kill animals? There have been cases where people were killed by having their life force drained. Perhaps this was something like that? Department Chief Lanchester, what do you think?" Laura asked Cyrus. But Cyrus just stood rooted to the spot. "Oh? Now that I really look at him, Cyrus doesn't look so good." "Mr. Cyrus, are you all right?" I asked. He gasped with surprise. "I'm fine. Sorry, I was just a little shaken." "Now then, what's happened?" He acted as if he had regained his composure, but after taking a step forward he tripped on a small stone and nearly fell down. When I saw Cyrus's lack of composure, I remembered what he had once told me when we were working on his field. Ever since his beloved pet dog had died in front of his eyes when he was a boy, he was afraid of having anything to do with animals. That's right, Cyrus had trouble dealing with animals. No, wait, maybe it's dead animals that he really has trouble with. Still, even if he has an aversion to them, I thought he would still be fine as long as he stayed in professional mode, like when he's talking to young women. I didn't think they would upset him so much that he'd go pale and forget how to walk. "Excuse me, Department Chief Lanchester, but are you sure you're all right? I can give you a piggyback ride if you'd like," said Laura, offering her muscular back to him. "No, I'm fine," Cyrus insisted, then joined the others to help confirm the situation. However, he still looked pale. "You're right. There's a high chance that dark magic was used here. Now, Maria, besides the fact that the presence of dark magic is strong here, is there anything else you can tell?" asked Cyrus, with at least his demeanor and tone of voice back to normal. "Yes, though I was too shaken to notice it at first. After concentrating on the presence again I can tell that the trail continues deeper into the forest. If we follow it, we might be able to determine the cause of all this." "Shall we go?" said Maria, sounding like she might charge off in pursuit of the trail any moment. I realized her expression was sterner than usual. Maria was angry. She was a kind and peaceful girl, but at times, like back when I was falsely accused of wrongdoing back at the academy, she could get genuinely angry. She had that same look now. I thought she had to be angry on behalf of the animals, whose lives had been stolen. And so she would stop at nothing to catch the person responsible. However, just as she was ready to go sprinting off in pursuit, Cyrus stopped her. "There's nothing I'd like to do more, but the sun will set any minute now. It'd be too dangerous to go any deeper into the forest at night. But by tomorrow, any traces of dark magic may have disappeared," said Maria vehemently. However, Cyrus remained firm. "We have to prioritize our own safety. I can't afford to put everyone here at risk." Maria looked surprised, glanced back at the rest of us, then bit down on her lower lip. She wanted to go after the culprit, but knew she couldn't put her friends in danger. It must have been frustrating for her. "Yes, sir," Maria said, hanging her head, and we all left the forest for that day. Just like Cyrus had said, the sun was drawing steadily closer to the horizon. When we saw the sun setting, we realized we needed to hurry and picked up our pace. As we headed out of the increasingly gloomy forest, we saw other dead animals. It was getting even creepier, and I just wanted to get out. As the sunlight started to turn orange, we safely found our way out of the forest. Just like Cyrus had told Tyler, he still remembered the way out, and we arrived back at the part of the fence where we could exit through the gate. When Tyler, waiting nearby, saw us, he looked so relieved. I guess we really made him worry. Though now that I think about it, anyone asked to wait behind because it was too dangerous in the forest would be beside themselves. Especially if they were waiting for a close friend. Thank goodness you made it back safely, said Tyler in a relieved tone of voice. Yeah, I'm sorry for making you worry, apologized Cyrus. In the light of the setting sun, I couldn't tell whether his face was still pale. As it was thought to be dangerous for us to remain outside after sunset, we climbed back into our carriages and returned to the local ministry branch. By the time we got there, I could see it starting to get dark outside the window. We were escorted back to the meeting room we'd used earlier. Lit by magic, the room was much brighter than the dusky sky outside, and I could see that Cyrus's face was still pale after all. So he's still not feeling better. This looks like a much more serious aversion than the one he has toward young women. Tyler finally seemed to notice how pale Cyrus was as well. You okay? He asked, sounding concerned. I'm fine, Cyrus once again replied simply. His tone of voice was firmer than before, as if he meant to discourage anyone else from asking. Now, about what happened in the forest. We came across a large number of dead animals, piled up in a large heap, explained Cyrus. A heap of dead animals, murmured Tyler. Yeah. All sorts of animals, big and small, lying dead with their eyes wide open. We couldn't find external injuries on any of them. But what does this mean? Asked Tyler, with a look of disbelief. We believe this is connected with a matter that I can only divulge to a select group of people, so I can't give you any more details. I'm sorry, apologized Cyrus. It was very like him to be honest when it would have been so easy to just come up with an excuse. I work at the ministry too, so I know there are some matters that can't be discussed with a wider audience. But Cyrus, just answer one question. Is that matter a dangerous one? Asked Tyler, clearly concerned. I think it will become dangerous. But we formed our team for this mission with that possibility in mind. Of course, I don't mean to put their lives at risk, said Cyrus, turning to look at the rest of us. Okay. But just promise me you'll make it back safe, said Tyler. Sure, said Cyrus, nodding firmly. Once we had finished giving Tyler our report, we were to head straight back to Cyrus's family home to stay there for the night. By the time we came back outside, the sun had set and it was completely dark. With magical lights set on our carriages, we headed to Cyrus's family home, the Margrave's Manor. It was gloomy inside our carriage, so I couldn't see how Cyrus's complexion was. But I couldn't help worrying that he was pushing himself too hard. Just like it had that afternoon, our specially made carriages cleared the distance in no time, and soon arrived at the manor. Welcome back, said Cyrus's mother, rushing out to greet us. She was accompanied by the rest of his family, who all greeted us warmly. After they had already given us lunch, they'd said they would serve dinner as well, and I was glad to take them up on that. Though, after the shocking events in the forest, I was worried that my appetite would only permit me to eat a little bit of food. But once I saw a familiar array of Japanese dishes arranged in front of me, those worries were immediately swept away. I could have licked my plate clean. In fact, I ended up having a second helping of miso soup. Looks like I have stronger nerves than I thought. Only, I did worry about Cyrus when I saw that he'd hardly touched his food. He didn't seem to have recovered yet. Looks like his aversion to animals is nothing like his aversion to young women, it's really serious. But he didn't react this strongly when I brought Pokey out back at his field. I wonder why? That dog died in an accident. Right in front of me. I recalled this line from Cyrus clearly. Right. Perhaps it's the bodies of dead animals that bother Cyrus, rather than animals in general. If the dog died right in front of him, then he must have seen its dead body. Though even after realizing that, there was nothing I could do. Cyrus's family and Haru worried too, but even when they asked if he was all right, Cyrus continued to cover up his feelings. "I'm just a little tired," he would say. Once dinner was finished, we all headed back to the rooms we were borrowing for the duration of our stay. After returning to my own room, I was about to try thinking about what I should do next, when I realized I really needed to go to the bathroom. Maybe this is because I had 3 bowls of miso soup. As I stepped out into the hallway and started walking in the direction of the bathroom, I noticed Cyrus and Haru standing near the door that led out onto the terrace. Still concerned about how Cyrus was feeling, I walked toward them and was about to call out to him when I saw how serious they both looked. While I was still trying to decide whether or not I should leave them alone, they started talking, having failed to notice me. "Cyrus, I heard the others talking about the pile of dead animals you found in the forest. Is that why you're not feeling so well at the moment? Did it remind you of what happened to your pet all those years ago?" asked Haru nervously. There was a brief silence. "Well, since you already know about that, I might as well tell you," Cyrus answered. "Yeah, that's right. But right now, that's my problem to deal with. Just leave me alone." Having declared this, Cyrus stepped out onto the terrace alone. Having received this firm rejection, Haru looked crestfallen. "This sure looks like a serious development, but it's nothing to do with me." I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing, and headed to the bathroom, but Katarina. Though Haru had been sulking, now she looked up and our eyes met. "Well, I can hardly just walk away now." "Hi there," I said with a foolish grin. "How much did you hear?" asked Haru. Of course, I knew she meant her exchange with Cyrus. "I'm sorry. I heard the whole thing," I apologized immediately. Haru shook her head. "No, it was my fault for having that conversation here." By Mr. Cyrus's pet, did you mean the dog he kept when he was a boy?" I asked. Haru blinked. "Ah, so you knew about that too, Lady Katarina." "Ah, yes. I heard a bit about it while we were working together on his field, at the magical ministry. I heard that he lost his beloved dog in an accident, and it died right in front of him," I said. Haru pondered this, then, with a hint of hesitation, spoke up again. "He was a big dog, named Leo. I played with him a few times. I heard that he died in an accident when they visited the royal capital." "So it was an accident in the royal capital? I didn't know that. Did he get run over by a carriage?" "No, well. Though Cyrus said it was an accident, once by chance, when I was playing hide and seek I overheard the truth from his father, the lord at the time. Apparently Leo didn't die in an accident. Someone killed him." My eyes widened when Haru said this. He was killed. By who? That I do not know. But I was so frightened by the Lord's voice when he mentioned it that I couldn't tell anyone else about it. And when I was older, I realized that if a margrave couldn't complain about his son's beloved dog being killed in public, then someone of very high standing must have been involved. I see. As the defender of our kingdom's border, the margrave held a very high position. If he had to hold his tongue when his darling son's dog was killed, and claim it was just an accident, that didn't leave many potential culprits. Then I suddenly recalled something Jedward once told me. It was about the conflict over the succession to the throne, which had led to deaths within the palace and caused the secret of dark magic to escape into the world. This had all happened earlier than my memories went back, but I'd been told that these events had left the palace in severe disarray. Since Cyrus was a few years older than me, I asked myself, what if he walked into the middle of that conflict without knowing about it? His dog might have been killed there. And, of course, the margrave wouldn't have been able to say a word against the royal family. Though this was only a guess on my part, if that was where Cyrus had developed his strong aversion to animals and their dead bodies, then there was nothing I could do about that. If anyone can help soothe Cyrus at a time like this, it would have to be. And so, after that happened, Cyrus began to avoid not only other dogs, but other animals, without exception. There was one time when we were playing together and found a dead dog. He went as white as a sheet and fainted. He fainted. Was it really as bad as that? Yes, as bad as that. This is no mere aversion, this is trauma. What on earth happened to Cyrus in the royal capital? That's why I was so worried when I heard what happened today. Since I knew what had happened when he was little, I thought I might be able to help him, at least a little, said Haru, her expression turning very forlorn. That was a pretty firm rejection she just received. But Mr. Cyrus is always like that. He hates to depend on other people, I said to try and cheer her up. But her expression remained the same. Is that so? She said, then fell silent for a while. I'm sorry, Katarina. I got carried away when I saw you and ended up saying too much. Please, can we keep this conversation a secret between us? In particular, what I told you about what Cyrus's father said. She then bowed her head, as if to announce the end of our conversation. Ah, yes, of course, I replied. I'll just be going to bed, then. Please get some rest as well, Katarina, she said, and left. Even from behind, she looked forlorn. Perhaps that was because I'd heard what Haru said just after Cyrus stepped out onto the terrace. I guess I'm not good enough for him. That quiet murmur quickly vanished in the darkness outside, but it stayed with me, reverberating in my chest. That was because it reminded me of a line that Mary, a rival character in the game, uttered in Fortune Lover. She muttered that line to herself when she decided that she couldn't support the man she loved. Haru's place in this rivalry, her present circumstances, resembled that scenario, and it was heartbreaking. I stood there in a daze for a little while, but when the wind blowing in through the open door made me shiver, I remembered that I was about to go to the bathroom and hurried to get there. On my way back from the bathroom, I thought to myself that, if Cyrus was still on the terrace, maybe I should talk to him. I didn't think I could do anything to heal his trauma. But can I really just leave him alone, with his face looking like that? I had a lot on my mind as I walked back to my room, but then I noticed Maria and Cyrus were out on the terrace together. Despite his expression being so strained before, Cyrus seemed to be at peace now. Ah! Looks like I won't be needed after all. I was relieved, but when the memory of how Haru had looked crossed my mind, I felt a pain in my chest. This time, I made my way back to my room in silence, hoping no one would notice me. I had learned that Cyrus had some terrible trauma in his past, but having also seen his most recent interaction with Maria, I decided that there was nothing I needed to do about it for the time being. So now I need to figure out what I should be doing right now. In order to determine that, I decided to go over everything I knew about the ongoing disturbance and my team's plans for the following day. Meeting Chairwoman, Katarina Clays. Meeting Representative, Katarina Clays. Meeting Secretary, Katarina Clays. All right, everyone, let's go over everything we know about this ongoing case. After venturing into the forest and seeing what happened to the animals, I think there's an extremely high chance that this is just like that previous case. So, do you think another dragon is going to show up? Gasp. That's right. The last time we investigated the depths of a forest, a dark familiar dragon appeared and we had to fight it. Indeed we did. That's when Poke turned gigantic and fought for us. Yep, Poke was cool, wasn't he? I know, right? Most of the time, he's just a cute, free-spirited puppy, but when the situation calls for it, he's so strong. Isn't our Poke wonderful? He really is. Our little guy is the greatest. Ahem. We're getting off track, so let's return to the topic at hand. Now that we know there's a chance we might have to face a dragon in the depths of the forest, we'll need to come up with a plan to fight it. This time, there might be more of them, or the dragon might be bigger. Why do you think there might be more of them, or a bigger dragon? Because of the animal carcasses we saw today. If they were able to claim the lives of that many living beings, then I think our enemy must have leveled up. Wow, Katarina, you're so clever. You're absolutely right. What a genius. Humph. There are some advantages to being a villainess for so many years, you know. No, I don't think that has anything to do with being a villainess. I guess not. Ahem. Well, we can just have Poke take care of any threats again. It's not like I'd be able to defeat any dragons with my dirt bump. Agreed. Although, can Poke really defeat them all by himself? What if Poke loses? What if we lose Poke? I may just be nervous after hearing what happened to Cyrus's beloved dog, but what if Poke were killed? I don't want to think about that. But Poke is strong. And we won't let him lose. I'll fight too. Poke is a precious member of my family. I've gotta protect him. I suppose you're right. Though I may not be able to fight with my dirt bump, I may be able to put up a fight with my dark magic. Though, when it comes to dark magic, I don't know how to do anything besides summon Poke and absorb darkness. If the dragon is a dark familiar, can't we suck it up by absorbing darkness? We were able to suck up that black snake. You're right. I'm sure we can absorb anything as long as it's made of dark magic. If we do have to face another dragon, let's try sucking it up. Great. I'll just slurp that dragon up. That'll take care of everything. Well then, does everyone agree? If we see a dragon, are we happy with the plan of taking it out by using the skull wand as a vacuum? No objections here. And with that, I settled on my strategy for the next day. I resolved to fight as well this time, rather than leaving it all up to Poke. Then I decided to lay down in my bed and go to sleep, with my resolution to protect Poke, to protect everyone still fresh in my mind. By the time I, Cyrus Lanchester, returned from the forest, I still hadn't fully recovered. This irritated me. I was annoyed at myself for letting myself get so shaken up by something so small, even though I wasn't physically sick. And now I've made everyone worry. Everyone at the ministry, none of whom know about my situation, and all my family, long-time servants of our household, and childhood friends, who do know. They've all had to walk on eggshells around me. I couldn't feel more ashamed. Not only do I have trouble dealing with young women, but I'm not great around animals either. In particular, just the sight of a dead animal makes me feel deeply distressed. As a department head of the magical ministry, that's just pathetic. I know the cause of it all. But I've always kept a tight lid on that experience, and have tried to avert my eyes from it. So usually, it doesn't bother me. But whenever I see a dead animal and an animal that died in abnormal circumstances, no less, the lid is suddenly pried open, and I end up in this condition. To top it all off, now that I've dredged those memories up, they won't go away for a while. It'll take time for the lid to close again. Well, I am a grown man, I can't go on pretending not to notice this problem. I have to face what happened back then and overcome it. It all happened when I was still very young. My father decided to take me with him on one of his trips to the royal capital for work. This was my first visit to the royal capital that I can remember, and I still recall being really excited leading up to the trip. Back then I had a dog named Leo at my side. He was a big dog with bright white fur who grew up alongside me. At the time of that fateful trip, he was pretty much the same size as me. I would cling to him every chance I got. My parents had taken Leo in soon after I was born, hoping that he would help keep me from getting lonely, since my brothers were so much older than me. He was brought up much like a brother and was a valued member of our family. He always came along when I played with my friends, and slept alongside me at night. We never spent a single day apart. So when I was told we would be apart when my father took me to the city, I threw a tantrum. My parents tended to spoil their youngest child, and ended up giving me permission to take Leo as long as he wore a collar. That was a mistake. I never should have taken Leo there. When I arrived at the royal capital, I had a lot of fun sightseeing. I was so impressed with the spectacle of the giant palace that I clung to my father as he headed there for business. Of course, Leo came along too. But it probably goes without saying that animals were not allowed inside the palace. So Leo and I waited for my father in the palace garden. Of course, I was still impressed with the palace, never having seen a building so big before, and I was also excited to see such a big garden. It was then that I heard an incredibly loud bang. Young as I was extremely curious, so I walked toward the source of the noise, pulling Leo behind me. Although my father had told me to stay put, I was just too curious back then. All I wanted was a peek at what had happened, so I shook off the servant who was watching me and ran to see what happened. The scene that greeted me was like nothing I had seen before. A woman was kicking a child who looked around the same age as me. She kicked him again and again, and stepped on him until he screamed. When I heard that plaintive cry, I ran to his side. "You're really hurting him. Please stop," I pleaded. The woman who'd been kicking the boy whirled around and glared at me. Her eyes were bloodshot. I felt a shiver go down my spine. "What are a brat and a beast doing back here?" she shrieked. She stalked over to me, then raised her foot as if to kick me. Just when I thought she was about to strike, a white blur appeared between us. It was Leo. He'd run in front of me to protect me. I could see his body trembling. He must have been kicked really hard. "You filthy beast! Now my shoes are dirty," screeched the woman, stepping away from us. I breathed a sigh of relief and cradled Leo in my arms. "Thank you, Leo. I'm so sorry." It was at that moment, when I said this to Leo, that I saw something plunge down toward us. At first, I didn't know what it was. But suddenly, bright red blood started pouring from Leo's body. "Leo, Leo." When I raised my head and looked carefully at Leo, I realized that he'd just been stabbed with a sword. As I stared at the wound, dumbfounded, I heard that shrill voice ring in my ears. "How dare you stand up to me, you filthy beast," she said as she pulled the sword out of Leo's body. Fresh blood spurted from the wound, staining my field of view red. Through that field of red, I could just see the young woman's ruby-red lips curling into a twisted, fearsome smile. From that point on, my memory went blank. When I came to, I was in bed in a townhouse in the royal capital. On the verge of tears, my father apologized again and again. "I never should have taken you there. For some reason, I had a high fever, and my head was so hazy that I didn't know what he was talking about." But when I heard that Leo was dead, I wailed until my tears dried up. Once my fever had subsided, I went back to my home territory. I remember my mother and older brothers embracing me, while looking like they were about to cry too. Ever since that day, I've had a terrible aversion to young women, and I've been afraid of getting too close to animals. As far as our servants and my friends were concerned, Leo died in an accident. I couldn't bring myself to tell them that it was my fault he was killed. Since they could see how distressed I was, they all avoided bringing it up. After that, there were some emotional episodes, like when I found a dead dog while playing with Ryu and Haru and fainted. But I didn't run a fever, like I had right after the incident, and my symptoms slowly eased over time. Eventually, once enough time had passed, I was able to put a lid on that memory, and no longer recalled it during my everyday life. I realized that would make my life easier. But my aversion to young women and the fear I'd developed around animals remained. When I turned 15 and it was time for me to attend the Academy of Magic, my parents were concerned, and asked if I'd be all right. Since I'd already put a lid on my memories, I told them I'd be fine and left my home behind. But when I got to the royal capital and saw women in fancy clothes, with makeup that included red lipstick, I started to feel unwell again. The lid I'd placed on my memories opened just a crack. But I was already teased because of my accent, which made people take me for a bumpkin, and I was able to convince myself that was the reason for my difficulty with women, thereby avoiding facing the true cause. Then one day I came to work at the magical ministry, and when I happened to see a dead animal in the course of my work, the lid on my memories came off. That was when I finally decided to investigate what happened that day. The truth was that I had felt for a long time that I couldn't just leave things the way they were. Through my investigation, I learned that the palace had been in a horrific state of disarray because of the conflict over the succession to the throne, and that people had died in the struggle. At the time, these facts were concealed and they largely remain so to this day. My father, living as he did in the borderlands, had known very little about what was going in the capital back then. So he took me with him to the palace, and I was unlucky enough to cross paths with a wicked member of the royal family. That's how that tragedy ended up happening. Since then, thanks to the reforms introduced by the current king, all the more pernicious members of the royal family were duly punished. None of them were left in the kingdom. It was all over. When I found out that fearsome woman whose face had floated up in the back of my mind so many times over the years was no longer around, I felt relieved. But my phobias still failed to improve. After beginning a new year at work, partly thanks to Katerina and Maria, my aversion to women had largely improved. That brings us to the present. Just as I'd begun to think I might soon be completely cured, I saw a dead animal for the first time in a long while. Many dead animals, and ones that had died under disturbingly abnormal circumstances to boot, and I completely lost my composure. I felt so pathetic. Maybe it's time to stop running from my problems, stop averting my eyes, and instead face them, and overcome them. At least, that's what I thought, but without knowing where to begin, I found myself gazing out into the garden. "Mr. Cyrus," called out a voice. Startled, I turned around to find Maria standing there. I was so lost in thought that I hadn't even noticed her approach me. "Are you all right?" asked Maria with an air of apprehension. "No, I'm not, but right now, that's my problem to deal with." "Just leave me alone," I said, the same words I'd spoken to Haru only moments earlier. I expected Maria would leave me alone as well, but "I cannot do that," she responded firmly. I opened my eyes wide and stared at her. "As far as I can tell, you are overthinking things, and going around in circles. Seeing you like this, I could not possibly leave you alone," she declared, looking straight back at me. I felt my shoulders relax. "You're right. My thoughts have just been leading me in circles while I've been standing here, and I don't know what I should do," I admitted with a wry smile. Maria looked back at me sharply. "First of all, if you speak to someone else, rather than going in circles by yourself, things might change for the better. If you have something to say, please go ahead." She gestured invitingly to encourage me to talk. There was something about the unreserved way she spoke that caused the dark feelings that had been swirling inside me to be whisked away, and I started talking like it was the most natural thing in the world. "The last time we were working on my vegetable patch at the ministry, I told you that a beloved dog of mine once died before my eyes, didn't I?" "Yes. You said that, since then, you have been a little bit afraid of getting close to animals." "Yeah, that's right. But that wasn't the whole story. The truth is that Leo, my dog, was killed, and it was my fault." "Killed?" "Yeah. Once, when I was little, and my dad took me with him to visit the royal capital, I took Leo with me to the palace. I was curious, and I ran around the garden there with Leo trailing behind me. Then I came upon a really awful scene." "An awful scene, sir?" "I encountered a boy about my age, lying on the ground and being kicked viciously by a young woman. The child was screaming, and without thinking, I ran between the woman and the child to save him. Out of a reckless, childish sense of justice, I begged the woman to stop. But this made her even angrier, so she got ready to kick me as well." Maria was silent. "Leo always seemed to think of me as his little brother, so he always used to try and protect me when I was in danger. This time was no exception, and he ran between us to protect me. Leo ended up getting kicked instead of me. Is that how he died? No, Leo was a big dog, too big for a woman to kill him just by kicking him. Then how did he die? When Leo came to my aid, it seemed to touch a nerve for that woman. She snatched a sword from a nearby knight and stabbed Leo with it. What? Blood went flying everywhere, and Leo died in my arms. I must have lost consciousness then, because the next thing I knew I was lying in bed in a townhouse in the city. Who was that woman? At that time, the palace was in a terrible state of conflict over the succession to the throne. I believe now that both the woman and the child were caught up in that dispute. So considering our own standing, there was nothing we could say about it. At that time, there had been no way a lower noble could object to the actions of the royal family, even if one of them killed a pet dog. When I woke up in the townhouse, my father kept apologizing, saying, "I never should have taken you there, this is all my fault," but he was wrong. It was all my fault. I was the one who whined until my parents let me take Leo with me, I was the one who said I wanted to visit the palace, and I was the one who went wandering off on my own when my father told me to wait for him. And I was the one who charged at that woman, out of a childish sense of justice. It was all my fault. It was all. Once I started this rant, I carried on without taking a breath, and I was almost shouting by the end. Mr. Cyrus! If I hadn't done those things, then Leo wouldn't have been killed so cruelly. I was thoughtless and stupid, and Leo was only trying to protect me, so it's my fault he was killed. How could I let that happen to such a precious member of our family, who grew up alongside me? Mr. Cyrus, are you so afraid to get close to other animals because you're afraid you might let something bad happen to them as well? Asked Maria. My eyes widened and I echoed Maria's words. Yes, I'm afraid I might let something bad happen to them. Those words slotted perfectly into a place in my mind that had been blank for all this time. Now I see. I've been afraid of getting another animal killed. Like I got Leo killed. I stood there in a daze, rooted to the spot. Part of my problem had been the fact that I'd tried not to think about it, and had kept a lid on my memories this whole time. I had never recognized anything more than the fact that fear had taken root inside me. But at this moment, Maria had just shown me what I was truly afraid of. One more thing, Mr. Cyrus. Yet. Still in a daze, I blurted out this half-hearted reply, and then Maria suddenly stepped closer to me. About the story you just told me, it was not your fault that Leo died, Mr. Cyrus. Wait, what are you talking about? However you look at it, it was my fault. However I look at it, it was not your fault. Of course, it was not your father's fault either. It was all that madwoman's fault. Madwoman. When I heard those words come out of Maria's mouth, I clammed up again. Well, I mean, who else would kick a small child, threaten another child who came to rescue him, then use sword to stab a poor dog who tried to protect him? She was clearly insane. I guarantee you that anyone who heard that story would blame the woman. The only thing to blame on your part, Mr. Cyrus, was your luck. It was bad luck that you came across someone so deranged. Apart from that, you were not at fault in any way whatsoever, said Maria angrily, her eyebrows raised. I'd never seen her like that before. It was only my luck that was bad. That's right. It was just bad luck. But if I hadn't taken Leo there... Mr. Cyrus, after that incident, were you injured in any way? Asked Maria. No, not at all, I answered. I found this apparent change of subject to be quite puzzling. In that case, I am sure Leo felt glad he was able to protect his dear family member. After all, you were always together, so you must have been very dear to him. Since he managed to protect you, Mr. Cyrus, I am sure Leo had no regrets. When Maria said this, I could see Leo in the back of my mind. He was about the same size I was back then, and had seemed to think of me as a little brother. He'd always come to my aid. That time, too, he had immediately protected me. I felt my shoulders relax, and the dark thoughts that had been swirling around inside me began to clear up. Now that I clearly understood the reason for my fears, that deep-seated terror I felt around animals began to ease. It was just as Maria said. Since it was that woman's fault that Leo was killed, and since she was no longer around, there was no reason to fear that animals would be killed because of me if I got close to them. Thanks, Maria. I feel like your words have saved me. Only, I still can't forgive myself entirely. The feelings I had carried with me for so long couldn't be dispensed with so easily, just because someone had told me I did nothing wrong, that it wasn't my fault. I suppose not. I don't think fears and anxiety that have been with you for so long will vanish right away. But even if you have to do it little by little, please forgive yourself. If you were to keep on blaming yourself, I am sure Leo would be sad too, since he only wanted to protect you. Yet. I guess you're right, I admitted, and Maria responded with a gentle smile. That smile caused quite the commotion in my heart. It was Maria Campbell who had told me that I looked just as lovely working out in my field, my rural background on full display, as I did putting on airs around the office. The closer I got to her, the more I felt myself attracted to her inner strength and her beauty. My heart always started racing and my mind went blank when I was around her, but I figured that, though she was wonderful, this was because I'd had so little to do with women in the past. But now I felt certain. I was in love with this woman, with Maria Campbell. She had given me a feeling that I'd never felt in my life up to that point. I wanted her. I wanted to spend my life with her. That was a feeling that I'd never known before. As I started to smile along with Maria, the corners of my mouth slowly turning up, I suddenly became aware of another pair of eyes trained on me. I looked in the direction of that gaze and saw a woman with black hair standing there. When she noticed me looking at her, she immediately left. Soon, I'm going to have to admit the truth to her. That I do have feelings for someone else. It would be disingenuous to allow myself to get engaged to someone else just because she felt affection for me, considering how I felt about Maria. The next thing I knew, the moon had moved across the night sky. Our plan was to head to the forest early the next morning. I needed to get some rest, and so did Maria, who had been kind enough to keep me company. However, I wanted to savor that time alone with her, if only for a short while, so I took one last look up at the night sky. Chapter 4, Set forth into the forest. No sooner had the sun risen than we all set off for the forest once again. And when it came time to pick our carriages again, something incredible happened. Cyrus said he would ride in the same carriage as Maria today. Since he'd said he was too nervous to share a carriage with her only yesterday, I wondered what could have changed. But then I remembered seeing them standing together peacefully and, sharp as I am, I figured out that something must have taken place. I deliberately made no comment. I can be very good at reading the room in situations like this. Cyrus was so cheerful that I could hardly believe how disconcerted he'd been the previous day, and he took Maria by the arm to escort her to the carriage. Cyrus's family as well as Haru came to see us off, but it seemed to me that Haru had a sad look in her eyes as she watched Cyrus and Maria walk away together. This time, Cyrus was in the other carriage, so Laura ended up joining Sora and me in our carriage. This time, since we would be journeying deep into the forest, she was wearing an outfit that was a little lighter on frills. Once we'd all sorted ourselves out, and we had a carriage occupied exclusively by members of the Magical Tool Laboratory, Laura cut right to the chase. Did something happen between Mr. Cyrus and Miss Maria? They are acting quite differently compared to yesterday. And now Cyrus is able to share a carriage with Maria, despite insisting it was out of the question before, said Sora earnestly, having been called on to ride in this carriage because Cyrus said he couldn't share one with Maria. Perhaps they've made some progress. But this is Mr. Cyrus we're talking about. Miss Katarina, do you know anything about this? Asked Laura, facing me now, but I shook my head. I didn't know what had happened between them. All I saw was the two of them talking with peaceful smiles on their faces. But something must have happened to produce that result. So, has Cyrus finally made his move to claim Maria? That means he might have to face Dewey in a duel. Wait, Sora might also be in the mix. And what about Cesar, or the other secret character? Come to think of it, I still don't know who the other secret character is. It's scary not knowing what romanceable characters there are. I can't predict what will happen next. Considering that Raphael, the student council president, was the hidden character in the last game, I don't think it's likely to be someone I haven't even met yet. So, for instance, I glanced at Laura, who was sitting across from me. When I saw her with different makeup on the other day, she looked more like a handsome man. But I don't think they'd have a macho character in women's clothing as one of the romanceable options in an Otome game. Hey, Sora. I just saw Miss Katarina pull a lot of different faces while she was looking at me. What do you suppose that was about? Wondered Laura. I'm sure she's thinking of something completely pointless. Worrying about it would be a waste of time, replied Sora. You're right. I had the same feeling. While they were talking, we arrived at the field next to the forest that we'd visited yesterday. After getting out of our carriages, we entered the forest through the same fence gate that we'd used yesterday. Tyler would be waiting for us by the entrance again today as well. If anything goes wrong, please let me know using this. It's a magical tool, and I should be able to hear it from here unless you're really deep in the forest, he said, handing me something that looked like a flute. I was a little surprised to see that the use of magical tools had spread as far as this regional branch of the ministry, and as a member of the Magical Tool Laboratory, I felt proud. Despite the mood having been pretty relaxed during the carriage ride, we immediately tensed up now that we were back at the forest. We followed the same path through the forest that we had taken the previous day. Maria walked together with Cyrus at the head of our group, peering intently into the forest. I'm sorry. I can no longer see the traces of dark magic that I could see yesterday, said Maria, frowning dejectedly. Traces of dark magic did not remain visible forever. Rather, they faded away with the passage of time, and enough time had passed that Maria could no longer see what remained of the magic cast here. Well, that can't be helped. Don't let it bother you. For now, let's go back to the spot where we found the animal carcasses yesterday, said Cyrus, and we made our way back to the place where we had seen that pile of dead animals. The forest ought not to have changed since yesterday, but perhaps because I was remembering that pile of carcasses from yesterday, it seemed a lot creepier today. Following Cyrus's lead, we came back to the place where we'd found all those animal carcasses piled up the previous day, but... Huh? Is this the right place? I suddenly blurted out. Yeah, this is it, answered Cyrus. But there was nothing there. Despite such a huge pile of carcasses having been there the previous day, now there was nothing at all. We could see the grass was flattened around the area where the mound had been, so we could tell there used to be something there, but there wasn't a single dead animal to be seen. Did someone tidy this place up last night? Is it even possible to get rid of so many animal carcasses in one night, in the middle of a dark forest? They may all be gone, but now that we are here, I can see traces of dark magic, said Maria firmly. There seemed to be no doubt in her mind. After peering intently at her surroundings, she exclaimed, "Found it! Though it is fainter than it was yesterday, I can still see the trail of dark magic. That means we can follow it." Her voice was filled with resolve. I see. Well done, thank you, Maria. In that case, let us follow the trail. Just stay by my side, said Cyrus, stepping closer to Maria. Yes, sir, she said, nodding firmly. Though this was hardly the time or place, at that moment the following carefree thought crossed my mind: aren't those two getting along nicely? But since this really wasn't the time, I shook my head to put myself back in the right frame of mind. Then Laura, Sora, Raphael, and I all followed Maria and Cyrus. As they followed the trail of dark magic, Maria and Cyrus walked deeper and deeper into the forest. The deeper we went, the darker and quieter it became, and creepier too. Then, after we'd been walking for some time, "Oh no, not another cave," I blurted out. When I looked at Sora and Laura standing next to me, I knew from the expressions on their faces that they were thinking the same thing. Yes, by following the trail of dark magic, Maria had led us to another cave. Once again, this development was just like the previous incident we were involved in. The only difference this time was that, while the entrance of the cave we found last time was at the end of a narrow, secluded path, this one was pretty easy to find. That said, the entrance this time was quite a bit narrower. I played here once as a child. The entrance may be narrow, but it's pretty spacious inside, explained Cyrus, a local. I sense a very strong presence of dark magic inside, said Maria. Now I'm sure of it. There's totally a dark familiar dragon in there. There's gotta be. Of course the other members of my group from our exam mission knew this, but even Cyrus and Raphael, who weren't there, knew the particulars of that mission from our report. Everyone wore a stony expression, yet we all knew we had no choice but to go inside. Cyrus stepped in front of Maria and placed his hand on the hilt of the sword he wore at his waist. I called out to my shadow. "Pokey, come on out." "Woof," said Pokey as he emerged from my shadow the same way he always did. Oddly, he didn't wag his tail happily and sit the way he always did. Instead, he faced the cave and growled softly. "Ah, you know what's in there too, don't you, Pokey?" I patted his head for just a moment. "Don't worry, if anything happens we'll fight together," was the message I tried to convey. I wasn't sure whether or not Pokey got the message, but he looked happy while I was petting him. The entrance to the cave was narrow, just as Cyrus said, with a narrow tunnel continuing for some distance after that. We all walked through the tunnel in silence. Eventually, we saw the end of the tunnel up ahead. Cyrus, at the head of our group, motioned for us all to stop. After carefully checking the end of the tunnel himself, he turned back to us. "Looks like there's something out there," he announced, then continued, "but it doesn't seem to have noticed us yet. Past this tunnel, the cave gets a lot wider, but there are a lot of boulders we can hide behind. From this point on, hide behind the rocks and try not to be seen." We nodded, and once he saw that we'd understood, Cyrus emerged from the tunnel first, then we cautiously followed him. We found ourselves in our wide open space, just like we'd heard about from Cyrus. There were plenty of boulders big enough for an adult to hide behind. Then we spotted something that looked like a murky black haze, which extended deeper into the cavern. This was the trail of dark magic. I guessed it was finally strong enough for me to see it. When I glanced over my shoulder, my eyes met those of Sora standing behind me. "I can see the trail of dark magic," I announced quietly. "Me too," a black mist trailing off into the distance, he answered quietly. It looked like our dark magic detection abilities were of roughly the same level. Just like Cyrus said, there's something in there. Though Cyrus can't see traces of dark magic, so how did he know? I guess martial artists are surprisingly good at sensing things. While making sure to hide behind boulders as we went, we all walked deeper into the cave with Cyrus at the head of our group. But, of all the rotten luck, my foot hit a pebble. It went rolling and made what felt like quite a lot of noise. "Sorry," I apologized, turning pale. "It wasn't on purpose, so there's no point in feeling bad about it. Let's stop here and wait to see what happens," said Cyrus, motioning for us to stay concealed behind a boulder. As I watched and waited, my heart pounding all the while, I saw a tall, thin man emerge from the shadows and walk toward us. Since we were hiding behind a boulder, he couldn't have found us right away, but I still had chills as I saw him glance around clearly looking for us. It's only a matter of time until he finds us. We can't let him find us. We can't let him find us. I thought I'd just spoken my mind at first, but that was Cyrus's voice, not mine. After murmuring this in hushed tones, in the very next moment, he stepped out from behind the boulder, approached the man from behind without making a sound, and took him down with a karate chop to the back of the neck. The stranger never even got the chance to cry out. That was amazing, Cyrus. I thought the same thing when I nearly got in a fight in the city and Cyrus saved me, but he really is strong. While I was marveling at Cyrus's strength, he left the man's unconscious body where it lay and rejoined the rest of us with a stern expression on his face. That man seemed strange somehow. I feel like something dreadful is coming. Everyone, make sure you're hidden behind a boulder, said Cyrus hurriedly. Ah. So I guess Cyrus really can sense some kind of presence. A moment later, a violent wind blew past us with an enormous roar. This is just like last time. A wind so powerful it feels like a typhoon, or maybe even a tornado. I hid behind a boulder and ducked down. Even after I crouched, the wind was so intense that it nearly carried me away. I stretched my arms out and felt around for a handhold, but I couldn't find any. Oh no, I really might go flying, I thought as I started to panic, but then I felt strong hands grab me by my shoulders. Since the wind was so strong that I couldn't keep my eyes open, I couldn't tell who it was. Once I was sure that the wind had finally died down, I opened my eyes to find it was Laura who'd grabbed a hold of my shoulders with her brawny arms. By the way, right next to me Cyrus had protected Maria in much the same way. A short distance away were Sora and Raphael. Raphael must have used his magic, since they seemed to be covered in something like a curtain made of wind. I'm just glad that everyone's okay. Thank you so much, Miss Laura, I said. Something else is coming, she whispered, a stern look on her face. I was too startled to react at first, but a moment later I heard another deafening roar, accompanied by another strong gust of wind. What's going on? With Laura still holding me down by my shoulders, I waited for the wind to pass. Just as I was thinking, thank goodness, the winds finally died down, there was one more enormous roar, followed by yet another powerful gust of wind. Really, what's going on? Once the third gust of wind had finally subsided, we stood by for a while to see if anything else was coming, but there was no fourth gust of wind. For a moment I was relieved, thinking that the worst was past. It's all over. Thank goodness, I murmured. Laura popped her head up over the boulder to survey the scene. No, it's only just begun, she said, a grim expression on her face. Listen, everyone, the situation is extremely dire now, Cyrus said after taking a peek of his own. When I popped my head out like they just had, what I saw was familiar, and also the last thing I wanted to see. Dragons. Again. And this time there are 3 of them, I murmured this in a daze, and the last of the wind carried my words away. Okay, well, I pretty much saw this coming, but now we have to face dragons again. And though each one is about the same size as the last one we faced, this time there are 3 of them. This is bad. This is a really bad situation. If I thought I could get away with it, I'd pretend I never saw them and leave this cave right now. Miss Laura, can we pretend we never saw these dragons and just go home? I asked Laura, who was standing next to me, in a quiet voice. If only we could, I'd like to do that too. But as members of the magical ministry, whose job it is to ensure everyone's safety, I guess we can't, said Laura with a far-off look in her eyes. The job of a ministry employee is to ensure everyone's safety? That's the first I've heard of it. But don't worry. We'll make sure to protect you and Miss Maria, and give you a chance to escape if it comes to that, she said with a smile. What a strong, lovely colleague she is. No, I couldn't possibly leave my dear colleague behind. Miss Laura, I'll fight to the very end. Miss Katerina, cried Laura as we clasped our hands together. We don't have time for that right now. We need to decide our roles for this battle, said Cyrus dispassionately, though his eyes were sharp as he looked at us. Hey, Laura and I weren't messing around. We were just psyching ourselves up for the grueling battle ahead, I thought. But I felt like this would only sound like an excuse, so I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I listened quietly to Cyrus as he explained what our roles would be in the battle. Right, since the dragons haven't noticed us yet, we'd better figure out our plan of attack while we still have the time. For starters, let's split up into pairs to deal with each dragon, said Cyrus. Well, there are 6 of us, so that does make sense. As for how to decide the pairs, first of all, Miss Katarina. Your dark familiar proved itself in the last encounter, so you go first. And Wolt, you go with her to protect her. Make sure nothing happens to her. Yes, sir, Raphael and I said in unison. Woof, said Poca happily. Now, next we'll send Mr. Cyrus. I can attack them with light magic, said Maria, volunteering. Since the last encounter, the number of spells I can use has grown thanks to the Covenant. If these dragons are made of dark magic, I am sure my light magic will be effective against them. Please, let me go. Maria said all this with a valiant expression. Cyrus looked slightly enthralled by her expression and took a while to respond. All right. I'll make sure to cover you, so just focus on your magic and do what you can. I guess that just leaves Sora and me. I don't know if it'll work or not, but I'll try giving them a taste of my magic. You try attacking them physically, okay, Sora, said Laura. Understood, Sora replied with a nod. And so we all divided up into teams. All right, everybody, good luck in battle, said Cyrus. Then we all headed off in our pairs, each facing a single dragon. Raphael and I went to face what I think was probably the first dragon to appear, the one that appeared near Cyrus and the man he took out. By the way, the other 2 dragons were accompanied by men who looked like they were members of the same gang as the tall, thin man Cyrus had taken out. But, in mere seconds, they were also knocked out by Cyrus and Laura. Cyrus and Laura are both so strong. As I watched this out of the corner of my eye, Raphael, Poki, and I all faced off against our dragon. Since there are 2 other dragons, I'll just call this one Dragon 1. Though I am calling it Dragon 1 for the sake of convenience, it looked almost exactly like the other 2. Actually, I couldn't discern a single difference. This dragon was the spitting image of every dragon I'd seen in storybook illustrations or video games in my past life. In other words, it was just like the last dragon I'd encountered in battle. As we stood in front of Dragon 1, it stared back at us with its black eyes. I have no idea what it's feeling right now. All I could tell was that it didn't look like it was about to attack us right away. Rather, it seemed to be observing us. If this were a battle manga, would this be a scene where we all take turns loudly announcing our own names? Or is there in fact no reason to be so aggressive yet? I really can't tell how much of a threat it is, but there's no point in just sitting and waiting for the dragon to attack us. In situations like these, whoever strikes first is bound to win. Poki, I said, calling my dark familiar to attention. Poka's shape seemed to warp for a moment, then he turned huge all at once. He had taken the form of a giant wolf, just like I'd seen him do before. His appearance was really ferocious now, but when he turned to look at me his eyes seemed to say, "Just leave it to me." That was Poca through and through. His transformation seemed to put Dragon 1 on its guard and it started to growl softly. I guess I could just let Wolf Poca take care of this, but... to start with, shall I try absorb darkness on it? If that works, not only Poca will be able to fight, but I will too. In response to my question, Poca looked a little dejected, as if to say, "What, don't I get a turn?" "All right," Raphael answered. "If it makes a move, I should be able to hold it off somehow, so please try whatever you think might work, Katarina." "Thank you, Raphael," I said, expressing my gratitude, before concentrating on visualizing my skull-top staff so it could take form. As it finished coalescing in my hands, the staff looked venomous and totally villainous. But I can fight with this. To protect the people I care about. I think if I just picture sucking up the darkness, like always, it should work. If I just think of the dragon as nothing more than a bigger lump of darkness, I'm sure it'll work. I raised my staff to absorb Dragon 1. Just imagine a vacuum cleaner sucking it up. It moved, cried Raphael. Since I was so focused on picturing my spell at work, I didn't notice at first, but Raphael's voice made me jump back to attention. When I looked up at Dragon 1, I could see its tail was, without a doubt, starting to move toward us. Almost like it was being sucked up. It's working. This'll work. I can absorb the whole thing. I tried picturing the darkness being absorbed even more strongly. When I did that, Dragon 1's tail started to look like smoke and my staff steadily slurped it up. Next, I just need to suck up the rest of it. Or, so I thought, but Dragon 1 wasn't as obedient as the snake I'd recently absorbed and it refused to go all the way in. When it realized its tail was being sucked into my staff, it turned back with a look of alarm, then started crawling away in the opposite direction. Huh! I cried out suddenly when I saw Dragon 1 fleeing. I mean, I had my guard up in case it tried to fight back, but I never would have expected it to run away. Dragons may look ferocious, but maybe they're actually sensitive creatures. Wait, this is no time to be thinking about that. I can't let it get away. Stop right there, I said as I ran after Dragon 1. Hold on, Katarina, don't do anything too reckless, said Raphael, and I just barely heard him, but I didn't have the mental leeway to respond to him. I said stop. Why, you? I cried, thrusting out my skull-top staff. When I did so, I was relieved to see the dragon's tail start to be sucked into the end of the staff again. If I keep absorbing it while running after it, that'll work. Luckily, probably because it was being absorbed, Dragon 1 slowed down. Thus a tableau formed with me on one side of the frame, holding out my staff to suck the dragon up, and the dragon on the other, trying to escape its fate by running away. Though this was hardly the time or place, I was reminded of a ghost hunting video game I once played in my past life, which featured the younger of two very famous brothers. This situation was a lot like that game. No, this isn't the time. I've got to hurry up and suck up that ghost, dragon with my vacuum cleaner, staff. With a slurping sound, Dragon 1's torso turned into smoke and went into the staff, but it didn't know when to quit and kept fleeing. I went after it, still brandishing my staff. While I was chasing Dragon 1, I passed by Laura and Dragon 2, who were also engaged in combat. I saw that Laura was giving Dragon 2 quite a pummeling with her magic, while Sora slashed at it with his sword, yet it remained unscathed. I knew it. Against these dark familiar dragons, normal magic and physical attacks won't work. At this rate, Laura and Sora will wear themselves out, I thought. Poki, go help Laura and Sora. I can take care of myself. Poki seemed to hesitate, but when I added, please, he ran to help Laura and Sora. Once Poki had charged at Dragon 2 and sunk his teeth into it, it let out a strangled cry and staggered back. Looks like Poki's attacks are working. Thank goodness. Thanks Poki, I said internally, before returning my attention to my own opponent. It's already sucked into my staff up to its chest. Just a little more. But, even with its chest having been vacuumed up, Dragon 1 continued trying to escape. It really doesn't know when to quit. As I continued chasing Dragon 1, next I passed by Maria and Cyrus. Maria pelted Dragon 3 with some kind of orbs of light. Dragon 3 gave a strangled cry and I could see it was starting to weaken. Looks like they're doing fine, thank goodness. Still, Maria's attacks are so cool. With her light magic attacks and giant Poki's battle of tooth and claw, any onlooker would have seen two epic battles. In contrast, I was playing a ghost hunting game by myself. No, this is fine, right? What's wrong with playing this like a ghost hunting game? Dragons are monsters too. I'll just make sure to suck up every last bit of this dragon with my vacuum cleaner, my staff. I tightened my grip on my staff and prepared myself for one last push. The next thing I knew, the dragon had been absorbed up to its neck. If I had to describe it, I'd say that it looked like Dragon 1's head was growing out of the end of my staff. Okay. Now I just need to suck up the head, and it'll all be over, I thought, letting my guard down just a little. It was at that moment that Dragon 1, after all that running away, made one last-ditch effort at a counterattack. In its last vain struggle, its head wheeled around to face me. Then it opened its huge mouth wide and spat some kind of black fog at me. Huh? I'm guessing you really don't want that stuff to touch you. But since I was already busy absorbing the dragon itself, I wasn't able to absorb the black fog as well. What should I do? Can I blow it back with my own breath? No, that won't work. What should I? At that moment, a gale of wind came from behind me, blasting the encroaching fog away before my eyes. I gasped and turned around. I'm glad I could be of some use, said Raphael, standing there with a look of relief. Thank you, I said. At almost the same time, I heard a slurping sound and saw the rest of Dragon 1 disappear into the end of my skull-top staff. I was so relieved, I felt all the tension leave my body. It's over. But really, this only meant that my battle with Dragon 1 was over. What about the others? I thought and looked around. First, I looked in the direction of Dragon 2 and the team of Laura, Sora, and Poki. Poki had his teeth buried deep in Dragon 2's throat and had brought it to the ground. Hooray! I cried out without thinking, clenching my hands tightly into fists. I watched the defeated Dragon 2 let out a puff of smoke and start to fade away. This was the same thing that had happened last time. Looks like these dragons really are the same kind we faced before. This left Dragon 3, which had been brought to its knees under a barrage of light from Maria. Soon, it started to fade away, just like Dragon 2. All right. We beat all of them. This time, I really thought it was all over. I felt a deep sense of relief. Yeah, looks like you got all of them. And after I went to the trouble of using so many test subjects to make these 3 behemoths. This voice came from the same direction the men had appeared from earlier. Without knowing it, I'd chased my dragon all the way to the entrance the men had used. When I looked in the direction the voice had come from, I saw a woman with long, black hair who'd become very familiar to me. Her name was Sarah. I had seen her not too long ago, during the incident with Maria, but I was unfortunately in the middle of a dark magic rampage at the time and didn't get to talk to her. The last time we spoke was the time that I went to Randall Manor to rescue Frey. Sarah had been willing to look the other way when we left that time. I couldn't help being concerned about Sarah. I knew that she had lived under horrible circumstances, and I'd been hoping for the chance to have a proper talk with her for a while now. Since I was already close enough to her to hear her voice, which wasn't very loud, it took me no time to walk right up to her. Sarah, I called out after approaching her. She had been staring off into space, but now turned to face me. Oh, it's you. Again. Tell me, why do you keep getting in my way? I've failed yet again because of you. What are you going to do about it? Sarah asked, frowning as if she were angry with me. Failed? Sarah, what were you trying to do? Is there any reason I should tell you? I've told you this before, but I really just want to talk to you. I want to know more about you. Honestly, I never know what you're talking about. I saw Sarah freeze up suddenly. Her eyes were wide open, as was her mouth. I'd never seen that expression on her face before. Oh? What's the matter with her? She isn't looking at me. When I realized this and followed her gaze, I realized she was looking somewhere behind me. I turned around to see what she was looking at, and who should I see standing there but Raphael, who had just saved me from danger moments earlier. Sarah was staring right at him, with her eyes wide open. What's going on? Why is she so surprised to see Raphael? Just as I was wrestling with that question, I saw Raphael freeze just like Sarah. His eyes were also wide open. It's almost like these two recognize each other. Have they met before? Aren't you? Raphael started to say something, but before he could finish, Sarah widened her eyes even more, then did a 180. In the very next moment, the inside of the cave was shrouded in darkness. Ah, this is Sarah's dark magic. Having been on the receiving end of her magic many times before, I knew this immediately, but it looked like the others weren't so quick on the uptake. Maria, are you okay? Said Cyrus, sounding worried. What is this? Wondered Laura, sounding upset. Hang on, Miss Laura, that's my hand you're holding, said Sora, apparently affronted by something Laura had done. Since they all seemed to be confused, I felt like things would only get worse if I didn't say something. Everyone, this is probably dark magic at work. Everything should go back to normal after a little while. If we just sit tight and wait a minute, we should be fine. All three of them then responded in the same order as before. I see. Got it. My, is that right? Ah, I see. So this is dark magic. After we waited for a while, just as I expected, the darkness vanished and our surroundings became visible again. But Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Yep, looks like everything really is back to normal, said Cyrus. That's how Sarah's dark magic works. She's used it on me a few times before, so I could tell. Sarah? I've heard reports about her. Was she here? Apparently Cyrus hadn't noticed Sarah. He had just defeated a dragon, so maybe his attention was focused on that. Ah, yes, sir. She came out of the far side of the cave a moment ago, and we spoke briefly, but then she used that spell to escape, I explained. I see, said Cyrus with a look of disappointment on his face. Sarah's still much better than dark magic than me, so I can't keep up with her. I'm sorry. But the thing that's bothering the most right now is... Raphael, are you okay? I called out, seeing that Raphael still looked stunned. His expression shifted, my voice must have snapped him out of his daze. Yes, I'm fine. Sorry, looks like I got a little flustered, he said, bowing apologetically. Given how calm and collected Raphael usually was, it was extremely odd to see him so stunned that he needed me to get his attention like that. Raphael, are you and Sarah acquainted with one another? In answer to my question, Raphael shook his head. No, I'm not acquainted with her. But they were looking at each other so intently, in fact, it looked to me like Sarah ran away after seeing Raphael, so what's going on? Raphael must have guessed what I was thinking based on my expression. I'm sorry. I just need a little more time to collect my thoughts, then I'll explain. Can you wait for the time being? He said with a wry smile. Okay, I said, nodding. Our exchange was interrupted by Cyrus, who sounded anxious. Hey! Maria, are you okay? Startled, I turned to see Maria slumped over and looking like she was about to fall down. Cyrus held her up. Maria. I hurried over to find that Maria was as white as a sheet. Maria, what's wrong? Are you okay? Were you hurt during the fight? Pale though she was, Maria heard my question and weakly shook her head. No, I am fine. I am not injured. However, I do appear to have used a bit too much of my magic. I see, so she just used too much magic. She overused her light magic in order to defeat Dragon 3. Maria had a lot of magical power, but it wasn't unlimited. If she used far too much of it, she could get exhausted. Unlike dark magic, normal magic could be replenished by resting. But given her condition, it looked like she would need a while to recover. However, Maria was always prepared to push herself too hard. "Excuse me, but I am fine," she said, trying to persuade Cyrus he didn't need to support her. "No, you aren't," I countered firmly. "Maria, if only you could see your face. If you keep this up, you'll collapse. In fact, you almost just did. Don't overdo it. Let Mr. Cyrus carry you for now and get some rest." "All right, Mr. Cyrus, pick her up," I instructed Cyrus. He did what he was told and picked her up. "Excuse me, but I really cannot impose on you to this extent," said Maria anxiously. I walked up to her, covered her eyes with my hand and said insistently, "Close your eyes and rest. If you don't, you'll collapse and we'll be in even more trouble." Maria finally seemed to understand her situation and closed her eyes. After I'd entrusted the magically depleted, weakened Maria to Cyrus, Raphael, Laura, Sora, and I started surveying the inside of the cave. "There's nothing over here," I announced. "Nothing in the back either," said Raphael. "No problem on this side," reported Sora. "This area looks okay too. Which means there's nothing left in the cave, right? Well, everyone, we don't want the sun setting on us, so let's head home, shall we?" said Laura, before picking up 2 of the unconscious men we'd left behind during the battle, tied up with rope, and slinging them over her shoulders like sacks of potatoes. "All right, then I'll take care of this one," said Sora, hefting the remaining man. "Let me know if you get tired, and I'll carry him too," said Laura. "I can hardly ask you to carry 3 men," Sora replied. "Besides, carrying one is no big deal for me. As there are 3 of them, I feel I should be carrying one of them," said Raphael, sounding somewhat discouraged. "Now, you may be the real head of our department, but you aren't exactly brawny. Rather, you're the brainy type. Besides, in case things turn dicey again, it'd be better to leave someone with their hands free to protect Miss Katarina," said Laura. This seemed to convince Raphael. But you know, it's rare to see Raphael looking so discouraged. And he's kind of cute like that. By the way, Cyrus had taken it upon himself to give Maria a proper bridal carry. When we came out of the cave through the same narrow tunnel we'd used to enter it, the forest somehow looked different than it had when we first arrived. I was wondering what exactly was different when I heard some chirping, then I realized what it was. When I looked up I saw some birds perched in the trees. "I see, so the animals are returning to the forest." This was also just like the last time we faced a dragon. When that dark familiar came to that other forest, the animals had all fled. I'm sure this forest will soon be back to normal. After heading back the way we came, we arrived safely at the gate in the fence surrounding the forest and found Tyler and the rest of his staff waiting for us. Is Miss Campbell all right?" asked Tyler, after noticing that Cyrus was carrying Maria. He sounded worried. "She used too much magic and wore herself out. I'd like to let her rest immediately, so let's return to the branch office for now and I'll tell you what happened in detail once we're there," said Cyrus, still carrying Maria carefully as he boarded his carriage. Since Cyrus had already boarded the carriage, Raphael took over explaining the situation to Tyler in his place. "In broad strokes, this was just the kind of disturbance you predicted, Tyler. It was very similar to the case you were notified about. And these men here are our prime suspects," said Raphael, indicating the men Laura and Sora were carrying. Thank you very much. Well, for now, we'll take these men into custody. Please take your own carriages back to the branch office," said Tyler as his staff took the men into custody. We climbed into our own carriages and returned to the branch office. The carriages were occupied by the same people who had ridden in them on the way to the forest. Cyrus, Maria, and Raphael rode in one carriage, and Sora, Laura, and I were in the other one. Those men weren't all that heavy, but I'm still a little tired after carrying one all that way, said Sora as he rotated his shoulders. I could have kept going, boasted Laura, showing off her bristling biceps. Just like on the way to the forest, our carriage made it back to the branch office in no time at all. Maria was taken to a break room to get some rest, while the rest of us were shown to the same meeting room we'd used the previous day. Our search in the forest and the battle with the dragons had taken a fair bit of time. It was late afternoon now, and the rumbling of my stomach sounded like a grand chorus. Thankfully, the same woman who had brought in the snacks yesterday came in with a new batch. "You must be hungry. Please, help yourself to some snacks," she said, and I gratefully started wolfing them down on the spot. These rice crackers are yummy. I also felt the energy from the sugar candies seep into my tired body. Perhaps spurred on by the enthusiasm with which I ate the snacks, or perhaps because they were also famished, everyone else started snacking too, though maybe not quite as much as me. "Now then, let me recount what happened in the forest," said Cyrus, before starting to explain to Tyler what had happened, while glossing over any of the details about dark magic. Just as I would have expected from someone as clever as Cyrus, he did a perfect job of summarizing what had happened. Now and then, Tyler turned to me to check that we were on the same page, and I somehow managed to sum up a few important details of my own. In particular, since Raphael and I were the only ones who encountered Sarah, we were asked a lot of questions about that. But we moved on after explaining that we had no idea why Sarah had fled so suddenly. This was at Raphael's insistence. I wouldn't have minded asking him about it myself, but when I caught a glimpse of his face in profile I could tell he didn't want anyone asking about it, so I couldn't bring myself to go on talking about it. Thanks to Cyrus, we smoothly moved through the rest of our report, and were finished without having taken too much time. Then it was time for us to head back to Cyrus's family's home, the manor of the Marquis, to spend the evening. When we returned to our carriages, Maria had recovered enough to stand up, but Cyrus was a little overprotective and insisted on giving her a bridal carry again. I could hardly believe this was the same man who had recently said that riding in the same carriage with Maria would be impossible. When we arrived back at the Lord's manor, the sky outside had turned orange. Once we were inside, Cyrus gave Maria another bridal carry straight to her room, startling everyone in the manor quite a bit. Haru was the only one who didn't seem stunned, but rather looked sad when I saw her. As I entered the manor, my stomach, always a slave to its own desires, started to rumble, demanding something for supper. "Really? After you ate all those snacks?" said Sora before bursting out laughing. "I have a second stomach for snacks. I skipped lunch, so there's no way my tummy would be satisfied with those snacks alone." One of the servants overheard my stomach's recital. "We already have a meal ready for you." Then we were served our supper. Skipping lunch may have had something to do with it, but the white rice and miso soup really hit the spot. Yesterday I'd had too many extra helpings of soup and ended up needing to run to the bathroom, so this time I thought I'd restrain myself, but with my longing for Japanese food finally having been answered, plus the fact that I'd been working on an empty stomach, my self-control failed and I had another helping. Everyone was tired from the day's work, so we all retired to our rooms early. Out of consideration for her condition, a light supper had been served to Maria in her bedroom. By the time we had returned to the manor, Maria's complexion was looking much healthier and I was glad to hear that she was able to eat as well. I was tired, so I thought I'd go to bed right away, but after having too many bowls of miso soup, I needed to go to the bathroom again. I'd repeated the same mistake that I'd made yesterday. But this is the only place I can eat miso soup, I thought defiantly, convinced that the chance to enjoy that flavor was worth an extra trip or 3 to the bathroom. On my way back from the bathroom I passed the same terrace from the previous night. Since Maria wasn't feeling well, I figured she couldn't be out there with Cyrus again. When I looked out through the open door, I saw someone else standing there. "Raphael," I called out, seeing his red hair fluttering in the night air as he turned to face me. "Katarina. I thought you were tired and would be going to bed early tonight. Couldn't you sleep?" he inquired. "Well, you see, I had too many bowls of miso soup and ended up needing to go to the bathroom, I confessed honestly. Raphael blinked in surprise, then chuckled in delight. That's just like you, Katarina. What about you, Raphael? I just wanted to feel the wind on my face, said Raphael. His expression seemed slightly sad. I wonder if he's thinking about Sarah. I was curious, but I thought he might still be collecting his thoughts on the subject. I decided not to pry. Instead, I stood beside him in silence and enjoyed the feeling of the wind on my face. It wasn't too cold, so it was quite pleasant. Standing outside and enjoying the wind isn't so bad. And it was those extra helpings of miso soup that made this possible, I realized, retroactively validating my eating choices. As I stood there in a daze, Raphael started speaking softly. Can I tell you something about that woman with the black hair, the one called Sarah? I'd thought he wasn't ready to talk about her yet, so I was a little bit surprised that he broached the subject. Sure, if you don't mind talking about it. Are you feeling better now? Yeah, and I think I'm about ready to tell everyone else too. But I'd like you to be the first to hear this, Katarina. Would that be okay? If that's what you want, go ahead. Yep, as the one who released me from that darkness, I want to tell you first. I don't think I did anything special for Raphael. I thought to myself, but this wasn't the kind of atmosphere where I felt I could say something like that. Instead, I just nodded. As I told you back in the cave, that woman Sarah and I are not acquaintances. I'm sure that was my first time meeting her. But I have seen her once before in Sirius Dyack's memories. Sirius Dyack? You mean the only son of Marquis Dyack, who died of an illness? Yep, that's who I mean. His memories were transferred to me using dark magic. So I know everything he ever saw or experienced. Within those memories, I had a glimpse of a young girl who I think was Sarah. At the hands of Marquis Dyack's wife, Raphael had been turned into a vessel for her son's memories, while Sirius himself was at death's door. But reality did not conform to her wishes. Raphael had remained Raphael even while carrying Sirius's memories. I'd heard the story before, but this was the first time I'd heard Raphael speak about any of the people he had seen in Sirius's memories. I was certainly shocked to hear that Sarah was one of them. I've heard that Sarah was forced to take part in dark magic research. Are you saying that's how they met? I inquired, comparing Raphael's account to what I'd heard from Larna about Sarah's upbringing. Raphael shook his head. No, that doesn't seem to have been the case. It's more like they met by chance, he said, looking slightly wistful. It seemed like Sirius was exhausted by his mother's dependence on him, and used to sneak out of his room from time to time to blow off some steam. As best I can tell, he met that girl with the black hair on one of these excursions. Since he wasn't allowed to spend time with other children, this girl was very special to him. The time he spent with her was the only time he seemed to truly enjoy himself, so much so that he wished they could be together forever. But then Sirius's illness worsened and he couldn't go and see her anymore. I'd heard that Sirius Dyack's mother, the wife of Marquis Dyack, used to cling to her only son to make up for the absence of her husband, who paid little attention to her and indulged his desires outside the home instead. I had also heard that, because of his mother's clinginess as well as his own illness, Sirius had begun to think, I'm tired, all I want is to be at peace. Upon hearing that he used to enjoy spending time with a young girl who might have been Sarah, I felt my chest grow tight and start to hurt. Raphael looked like he felt much the same way. When I first recalled those memories of Sirius Dyack's, I felt sorry for him. But when I saw that woman today, it dredged up those memories of the time Sirius spent with that girl, and it really shook me up. I was reminded that Sirius really did have a life of his own. Sometimes I've thought of him more like a character in a storybook that I remember reading, so I hadn't really let myself be bothered by his memories before. Today, I felt truly sorry for him for the first time, muttered Raphael. Then, with a self-deprecating chuckle, he added, I'm heartless, aren't I? You're definitely not heartless, Raphael. You're really kind. I mean, you're someone who can shed tears for a child he's hardly had anything to do with. Tears. It appeared that Raphael hadn't even realized he was weeping. When he raised his hand and felt the tears streaming down his cheeks, he looked bewildered. What are all these tears? As Raphael stood there in a daze, the tears continuing to stream down his cheeks, I felt really sad all of a sudden. So I hugged him tightly and patted him on the back. When you feel like crying, it's better to let it all out. You'll feel better, I said. Raphael chuckled at first, but then silently wept for a while. When the tears finally stopped, I patted him on the back again. Once he calmed down, Raphael looked embarrassed. Sorry about that. I feel like I can't help but relax around you, Katarina. I feel like I've heard that before, like from Mr. Cyrus. He said I'm like one of the older ladies who used to work on the farms around here, so he feels like he can relax around me, huh? Come to think of it, Cesar also said something similar the other day. One of the older ladies who used to work on the farms. Raphael chuckled as if he found this amusing. I was just glad to see a smile on his face. After laughing for a while, Raphael said, "Yep, I do feel better now. Now I feel like I can make a proper report in front of everyone tomorrow. Though first, I'll make sure to apologize for dodging those questions today. That was selfish of me. I really am glad I talked to you first, Katarina." "Thanks." "Oh, no, I didn't do anything. If Maria were here instead, I'm sure she could have come up with something lovely to say, but there's no way any pretty words would come out of the mouth of a villainess like me. No, you really helped me out. Now, I'll need to check something first, but then I'd like to talk to you about another thing. When I'm ready, will you listen?" said Raphael. I nodded energetically. "Yes, though I really can't do anything besides listen to you." "That's all I need," said Raphael with a gentle smile. Then we parted ways, and I returned to my room. I don't think I'll need the bathroom again, I thought to myself, leaping into bed and immediately drifting away into my dreams. "Sarah, I feel like something was off with you today," said the man standing in front of me, his eyes smiling behind his glasses as if he were enjoying himself. His gaze was trained on her with the same attention he always gave his research subjects. I knew that if I let my ill humor show, he wouldn't take kindly to it. "I guess so," I half-heartedly agreed, hardly him paying attention. He must not have liked my attitude, since a note of irritation crept into his voice. "Haven't we had a few too many hiccups lately? If things keep up like this, it may get in the way of my research." Research was everything to this man. Things like the lives of others and ethics came second, or maybe even third, on his list of priorities. The thought that his research might not be going well made him extra annoyed, to the point that he lost interest in all else. He was truly an easy man to read. Of course this failure was extremely regrettable, but so was your failure to take care of Maria Campbell last time. We may be able to falsify other people's memories, but not hers. If things go on like this, they might learn that their memories don't line up with Maria Campbell's and figure out that we've been falsifying them all this time. The man scratched his head in irritation. "I've taken action to prevent that." "Please don't worry," I said offhandedly. The man frowned but said nothing more. He was probably thinking that no matter what he said to me, it wouldn't have any effect. He really was so easy to read. "Now then, I have a report to give, so you'll have to excuse me," I said, striding past the man. By failing to capture Maria Campbell before, and then failing to increase the ranks of our dark familiars on this occasion, things really hadn't been going well from the perspective of our employer. That man wasn't as easy to read as my present company, but I bet he was none too happy with us. As far as I was concerned, though, things were getting pretty interesting. It was always more interesting when things went badly, compared to when they went well. I always welcomed a crisis. To me, they were fun. Ah, I haven't felt this way in a while. And to think I didn't feel a thing when my wife was arrested for her crimes, and I lost my house because of her. If things keep progressing like this, maybe I'll get to see that child again. I wonder what the look on their face will be when I show up? I can't wait to find out. Chapter 5, Time to return to the magical ministry. Now then. The day after we defeated the dragons, Raphael reported the fact that he had recognized Sarah to Cyrus. He mentioned there was a possibility that she had only fled after realizing who he was. Seeing him may have shaken her. At Raphael's request, I accompanied him at this discussion. I do grasp your background, Wolt, and as I understand you were also shaken, I don't mean to blame you. However, as an employee of the magical ministry, it wasn't right for you to conceal such vital information from us. You should have provided it right away. In future, try not to make the same error, said Cyrus with his boss face on. Yes, sir, replied Raphael firmly. Then Cyrus, our level-headed boss, devoted himself to writing a more detailed summary of the previous day's events, processing that information as part of his own job. After a good night's sleep I feel much better. Thank you so much for yesterday, said Maria with a cheerful smile. Overprotective that he was, Cyrus kept worrying about her. Maria could only express her gratitude. Cyrus has always been a bit of a busybody. He's always worrying about me too. Since he had difficulty dealing with young women, and because Maria was his first love, he'd struggled to interact with her in the past. The events of yesterday, which had seen him carrying Maria in his arms the entire time after we left the cave, had worked as a kind of radical treatment for his aversion. That must be why he can interact with her normally now. Now his tendency to care too much about everyone had shown through, and he'd become far more assertive in terms of showing attention to Maria. At this rate, he might actually be able to compete with Dewey. Maria, who tended to work too hard and who wasn't good at relying on others, seemed to find it a little easier to depend on Cyrus now that he'd changed. I saw her ask him to explain work matters to her more often, and they were starting to spend more time together. From an onlooker's perspective, they seemed to be getting along very well. The residents of Cyrus's family manor watched them with warmth in their eyes. Only one person looked at them with an expression of sadness and heartbreak, that was Haru. Originally, she was scheduled to return to Zairma immediately. After what happened, I feel like I want to stay and help repair the damage to the farmland. I want to repay the people here for their hospitality, said Haru, explaining why she would be staying a while longer. Since Sora, Laura, and I weren't great at paperwork, we all helped Haru out on the farms. Because the fields had been trampled by all the animals, they would need to be plowed again. We would also have to clean up the remains of vegetables that had been eaten and were now strewn across the ground. And once that was all done, there was still rice to be harvested. The farmers of the region of Victoire were so busy that they were more than willing to accept a helping hand. Though I understood very well that the farmers' situation was difficult, my heart sang at the opportunity to work on a field for the first time in a while, and to help harvest rice for the first time since my past life. Wow, Katarina, you're good at this, said one of the old farmers, praising me for the deftness with which I reaped the stalks of rice. I couldn't help but smile. No, really, I said. This was the first time that my experience harvesting rice in my past life had ever come in useful. Haru, who was helping us, also sang my praises. I can't believe this is your first time. You really are good at this. Heh, I laughed, feeling awfully proud. By the way, since Haru also had experience harvesting rice back in Zairma, she was very good herself. We do hope you can come and help us again next month, when we plant the vegetables, said the old-timer from the farm, smiling. Heh, please, just leave it to me, I answered, holding my head even higher. Then Sora butted in. Hey, he said sharply, you know you can't stay here that long, right? You have to go back to work at the ministry. Ah. That's right, I said in surprise. The old-timer looked disappointed. Oh, that's right. You work at the magical ministry, don't you, Katarina? You were starting to fit in so well that I thought I was talking to a local kid. I'm sorry. I was getting so into the farm work, I forgot that I have a job to go back to, I said. The old man and Haru laughed, while Sora just looked exasperated. Oh, Gramps. Do you mind if I carry these away as well? Said Laura, hefting a huge armful of rice stalks. Ah, yes please, Miss Laura, answered the old man. He seemed astonished when he saw how briskly Laura carried off the bundles of rice stalks. Gee whiz! It's such a great help to have you young people here with us. Why see, now that all the young people have left and it's just us old-timers here, even our daily farm work is getting to be tough, murmured the farmer. The lack of young people staying in the country was a problem in my past life. Looks like the same is true here. What a pity. It's so green here, and the food is delicious. Oh, Katarina, it makes me so happy to hear you say that. I'm fond of this place too. When I was young, I used to think the country was boring, but after I went to the city, I missed the country and decided to come back. There's so much nature to enjoy here, and the people are so peaceful. That's so true. I'm sure people would see how nice it is here, if only they would come. If only there was some way of attracting younger visitors. At times like these, I always wish my knowledge from my past life would come in useful, but nothing springs to mind. I have an idea. To start with, why not try spreading awareness about the food here? I tried Zyrma cuisine for the first time on this trip, but it was pretty tasty and now I'm totally obsessed with it. How about you start marketing the food of this region and get people interested that way, suggested Laura as she carried away another bundle of rice. Oh, yeah. I totally agree. Try showing more people the appeal of your cuisine. If possible, I'd like for it to become popular in the royal capital. I said, sneaking in my own personal wishes. The old man blinked in surprise. I see. Since I'm used to eating our cuisine, I'd never really thought much about it, but you're right. I'll bring it up the next time our Farmers Guild meets. If this goes well, one day I might even be able to eat Japanese food in the royal capital. How exciting! Well, then, I think we've done enough for today. Thanks, everyone. Once we're finished milling the rice, we'll have some delivered to you. Rice. Fresh rice. I can't wait. I shrieked. I was delighted at the thought of finally getting to eat some freshly harvested rice. Wait, the others are probably nearly done with the paperwork here, and the farms are pretty much back to normal. Don't you think we'll probably be ordered back to the ministry tomorrow, or the day after? Said Sora. I was mortified by this realization. Now. That isn't settled yet, said Laura, trying to cheer me up. But I had a bad feeling that Sora was right. I see, so you'll be going home soon. It was so much fun working on the fields and paddies with you all. I'm sad to see you go, said Haru, her eyes slightly downcast. Will you be staying in Victoire for a bit longer? I asked. Well. It won't be too long before I head home. My family is probably worried about me. This has ended up being quite a long trip for you, hasn't it? Tee-hee. It really has. But I've had so much fun. Haru, please feel free to visit the royal capital again sometime. I'll treat you to some tasty food this time. Really? I can't wait. I then asked Haru what her address was and we agreed to write to each other. After I finished chatting to Haru and returned to the Lord's Manor, sadly, Sora's prediction came true. We managed to complete all the paperwork today. I'm told that the work mending the damage to the fields is also pretty much done, so we'll be returning to the ministry tomorrow, Cyrus announced cruelly. In my heart, I burst out crying. Fresh rice. What about my fresh rice? Dinner that evening would be our last meal in the region. In the hopes of tiding myself over by filling up on Japanese food now, I had extra helpings of rice and miso soup. After having run to the bathroom during the night 2 nights in a row, I knew I should show more restraint, but when I thought about the fact that this would be my last chance for a while, I just couldn't. I had more helpings that night than I'd had for any of the previous meals we'd eaten there. I kept eating until my dress was about to burst at the seams around my waist. As a result, I had to run to the bathroom during the night again. After just barely making it to the bathroom without incident, on my way back to my room I happened upon Cyrus, who was furtively calling at Haru's door so they could meet and talk. They then went to the same balcony where they'd spoken 2 nights earlier. I guess this is just a convenient spot. Still, why does someone always seem to be out here when I'm going to the bathroom? Wait, could it be that someone has a rendezvous here every day, and I only noticed because I've had to go to the bathroom? While I pondered this chicken and egg problem, I worried that I might be discovered if I just walked past, so I stood still and eavesdropped. Miss Haru, although I said that night that there isn't anyone I have feelings for, the truth is that there is someone else. Though we aren't yet lovers, or even particularly close acquaintances, I can't see myself getting engaged to any other woman, let alone married, said Cyrus, looking Haru straight in the eye. This was a very Cyrus way of phrasing things. So it would seem, Haru replied. Having watched you during this trip, Cyrus, I realized who it is you have feelings for. I knew it, I thought when I heard her say that. When I saw that lonely look in her eyes, I could tell that she knew everything. Before we arrived here, Maria said she would support Haru and help her find out what kind of woman Cyrus likes, but since arriving here and getting caught up in our mission, it looks like Maria forgot. Haru didn't make too many attempts to get closer to Cyrus either. She just looked at Maria and Cyrus with that lonely look in her eyes. But what about Cyrus himself? You knew, he cried in shock, apparently not having thought that anyone could tell how he felt. Yes. That's when I realized I would never be the one for you. And so, at that moment, I thought Haru might have something resentful to say to Cyrus, like complaining about the fact that Cyrus had lied about not having feelings for someone else when asked. However, all Haru actually said was, Cyrus, I will pray that you two will be brought together and be happy together. Given the dignified tone of voice with which she said this, I felt like Haru was speaking from the heart, rather than just putting on a brave face. With her back straight, Haru gracefully walked away in the opposite direction from me. My view of her departure was beautiful, but my heart still ached for her. Haru must have been a rival character in Fortune Lover 2. In the first game, Mary also had to watch her fiancé grow attracted to the protagonist in that route, and in the end expressed her wish for their happiness before departing. When I played the game, all I thought was how touching the scene was, and how cool Mary was. But the Haru I'd met here was a real, living person. Her feelings weren't make-believe. This realization made me feel sad, sorrowful, even. When I looked at Cyrus from behind as he stood on the balcony, he looked somewhat sorrowful too. I returned to my room with a fairly solemn feeling and went to sleep. The next day, once we'd all made our preparations to return home, we stepped out into the manor's garden. Naturally, Cyrus's family came to see us off, but so did Tyler from the regional branch office. Only Haru was nowhere to be seen. Cyrus's mother of unspecified age had prepared so many parting gifts for us that I could hardly keep track of it all. There were lots of Japanese-style ingredients and sweets, so I was extremely pleased, but there turned out to be so much that it wouldn't all fit in the carriage. So, with tears in my eyes, I left some behind. By the way, the fresh rice didn't make it in time. But when she saw me about to cry again, Cyrus's mother promised that, if possible, she would make sure to send some to me in the royal capital. Thank you so much, Mrs. Lanchester. I cried, so pleased that I felt I might throw my arms around her. I'm honored to see you so pleased. From now on, I'll send a lot more care packages addressed to Cyrus, so make sure to take your share, said Cyrus's mother with a wonderful smile. My delight soared to new heights, but Cyrus wore a more ambivalent expression. Once everyone had a chance to say goodbye, our carriages set off again. The passengers in each carriage were different than when we had first arrived. Cyrus, Maria, and Raphael took one carriage, while Laura, Sora, and I took the other one. After we had traveled for a little while, as I was gazing out the window, I spied a woman out in one of the fields, waving at us enthusiastically. It was Haru. "Goodbye, Haru. See you again sometime," I shouted out the window, waving as hard as I could. With the image of Haru's receding figure burned into my mind, our mission in Victoire came to an end. The day after we departed from Victoire, at high noon, we arrived safely back at the magical ministry. Since we'd contacted them beforehand, all my familiar friends were waiting for us outside. They all often seemed to be willing to take time out of their days to greet me when I returned from a long work trip. When I considered how busy they must be, and that they took the time in spite of that, I felt so happy to have such good friends. Katarina. Lady Katarina. Big Sis. They were all delighted to see me make it home safely. I wanted to tell them all about my fight with the dragons, and everything else that had transpired, but first, we have to report on our mission, said Cyrus as he escorted me back to Larna's office. As they watched Cyrus lead me away like a lamb to the slaughter, my friends all chuckled wryly and said they'd see me later. All right, now we're back, and it's time to report to Larna, the boss, I told myself, though it turned out that, with Cyrus on our team, all the important details had already been communicated to Larna ahead of time. So after Larna welcomed me back, we should have been basically done. Unfortunately, she was very interested to hear even more about our latest encounter with dragons. About how big were they? What color? And how did they move? She asked, bombarding me with one question after another, her eyes gleaming. So the meeting somehow took even longer than I'd anticipated. Finally, I'm about to be released from Larna's questioning. I thought to myself, but she showed no signs of running out of questions. In the end, Cyrus had to cut her off. Everyone's tired, he pointed out, so let's continue this at a later date. Larna looked a bit dejected, but after we exited the room, she came over to me. When things settle down a bit, I'll make some time for us to continue our discussion from the other day. Larna was always too absorbed by her hobbies, but it looked like she had remembered the discussion we'd had before the trip. I nodded firmly and gave her my thanks. Once Larna had really let me go, I returned to find that my friends really had waited for me. On top of that, they'd even booked a room for us to sit and have tea and snacks. They really spared no effort in welcoming us back. Since we had just returned from an extended mission, I'd been given the rest of the day off from work, and I took full advantage of this to enjoy having tea and snacks with all my friends. And then I pulled hard on my staff and slurped the rest of the dragon up. I regaled them, recounting my battle with the dragon. All my friends knew about dark magic and dark familiars, so I didn't have to worry about saying too much. I was excited to tell them all about the battle. I told them all about the moment the dragons appeared in the cave, like how I started to absorb one of the dragons with my staff, then had to chase after it as it ran away. I took care to enliven my story in vivid details and energetic gestures every step of the way. Hold on, is that really true? How could you do something so dangerous? Wait, really? You should think more carefully before you act, Big Sis. Hey, were you out of your mind? You never fail to amaze me. While Lady Katarina, how could you do something so dangerous? How amazing! Lady Katarina, you're almost like a knight in a fairy tale. I'm just glad you made it back safely. My friends were variously shocked, worried, or impressed, quite a wide variety of responses as they listened to my account. But by the time I was done, they all looked strangely tired, or perhaps even disheartened. After a very long sigh, it was Jetord who spoke up first. Did I not tell you before you went not to do anything dangerous or reckless? Big Sis's definition of reckless might be different from ours. Seriously. Maybe fighting a dragon one-on-one doesn't seem reckless to her. Somehow. Lady Katarina, I am so glad you made it back safe. Lady Katarina fighting a dragon. I wish I could have seen it myself. Sophia, don't say that. I feel like it'll only lead to more trouble. With only one exception, they all sounded exhausted as they gave their final appraisal of my story. It looked like, by fighting a dragon head-on, I'd made them all worry about me. Well, you see, I didn't have a choice at the time. It felt like we'd all have to fight anyway. Oh, and Raphael lent me some support with his wind magic, I said, hurriedly justifying my conduct. Please, wait just one moment. What do you mean, he supported you with his magic? Does that mean you were in danger? You made no mention of that in your story a minute ago, said Jedord, butting in before I could finish pleading my case. I felt like I had to tell them how the dragon had tried to fight back one last time by spewing a black fog at me. When I did, their expressions turned even more grave than before. What part of that sounds like a mission that went off without a hitch? Just what is wrong with your head, Big Sis? You claimed you weren't in any danger when that happened? I'm in awe of your optimism. Lady Katarina, I mean this, please be more careful from now on. Why do you insist on taking so many risks? So some dragons can breathe black fog? I wish I could have seen it. I mean, that does sound dangerous, Lady Katarina. When even Sophia is saying you should have been more careful, you really ought to think about what you've done. Now that everyone had admonished me again, I had no choice but to apologize. I'm sorry for making you all worry. With a dark smile on his face, Jedord spoke again. If it looks like you might do something reckless and put yourself in harm's way again, I shall imprison you in your room. I felt a shiver go down my spine, but managed to maintain my posture and replied firmly. I'll be careful. I got a lot more lectures after that, but the long and short of it was this: though they all understood it was a ministry mission and some danger was unavoidable, it was a really bad idea for me to talk about my exploits like I was a hero in some epic tale, excitedly describing dangerous events without even recognizing that they were dangerous. In other words, I should make sure to recognize danger from now on and act accordingly. I'll be more careful from now on. Once everyone was done with their nagging, I remembered that there was one more thing I was supposed to say. I hurriedly straightened my posture, then bowed my head. I'm really glad to be back, everyone. Welcome home, everyone replied, smiling. Yep, I'm back where I belong. Finally, with about an hour having passed since we sat down, our tea time came to an end. I guess everyone's busy, they do all have jobs. Keith and I would be heading home to Clay's Manor together in our carriage, but... Why are Mary and Sophia sharing a carriage with Katarina? Asked Jedord, the corners of his mouth twitching. Why, we are going home as well, so we just thought we'd accompany her part of the way. You and the others still have work to do, don't you, Prince Jedord? Please feel free to head back to work in your own carriages, answered Mary with an elegant smile. In that case, perhaps I shall accompany you partway on my way to work. Oh, but our carriage cannot carry that many people. I understand. Keith, please get out of the carriage. Huh? This carriage is headed to Clay's Manor. Why should I have to get out? I won't. Master Nicole, Prince Alan. Prince Jedord must find it too lonely to ride in his carriage by himself. Please go with him. Eh? What are you talking about, Mary? That is not so. I see. All right, Jedord, you can ride in my carriage. Hold on, this is not what I want. Nicole, wait, Alan, you too, why are you grabbing my arms? Prince Alan, please take him away. Sure, will do. Alan, just how badly whipped are you? Please, wait one moment. "Katarina is my fiancée," were the last words I heard from Jedward as he was taken away. I got into my carriage with Keith, Mary, and Sophia, and we headed back to Clay's Manor. Mary had a look of satisfaction on her face, as if she felt victorious for some reason. During the carriage ride, I talked to my friends some more about my trip. But, perhaps because I had relaxed after being reunited with my friends, the swaying of the carriage was enough to lull me to sleep. As I nodded off, I heard Mary speaking in a gentle tone. "Lady Katarina, you must be tired. Please feel free to rest your head on my shoulder." I took her up on her kind offer. With the carriage swaying, and me surrounded by my closest friends, I very quickly dozed off. I saw a room with pale pink walls, a bed with a metal frame with an azure cover on top, and a black table at its center. This room belongs to Akan, my best friend in my past life. It's that dream again. It was only a few days ago that I last had this dream, while I was at the party to commemorate Sorcière's founding. I'm so lucky. Okay, I'd better glean whatever information I can this time as well, I thought, straining my eyes. Just like last time, I was presented with a game screen. Cyrus was displayed on that screen. Ooh, how timely. I just got back from Cyrus's hometown. "I shall take it down with my light magic," said Maria. "I'll protect you. I won't let it give you so much as a scratch," responded Cyrus, a line worthy of a romanceable character. "Looks like a fight scene. Reminds me of the one I saw with Cesar a couple of dreams ago," I thought. Then, to my shock, "There won't even be a trace left of you once my Cerberus is done with you," said Katarina as she appeared on screen, cackling. "I can't believe it. Katarina is the enemy again. Now, finish them, you two," said Katarina, dropping another villainous line, and a dragon appeared on screen. Can it be? Isn't that the dragon I defeated just the other day? The only difference was that there was just one of them. Though the bad guys also had Cerberus, Poka's name in the game, so I guess they still had pretty favorable numbers. Cerberus and the dragon attacked Maria and Cyrus, and Maria struck back at them with her light magic. Just like I'd seen her do in real life, Maria struck down the dragon with her light magic, and then she defeated Cerberus. I still thought of him as Poki. To top it all off, Maria and Cyrus managed to capture the evil Katarina. My guess was that she went on to be thrown in jail, a bad end. So this is what Cyrus's story event should have been, during the mission in Victoire. Since they caught Katarina, I guess it's technically a good end for them. That was close. I shouted as I suddenly awoke. Mary, Sophia, and Keith all stared at me with wide eyes. "Big sis, what happened? Lady Katarina, are you all right? Lady Katarina, is something the matter?" Everyone asked after me out of concern. "Oh, nothing, I'm just a sleepyhead," I said to smooth things over. Though I guess that much is true. More importantly, if the dream I just had was accurate, then the mission I just returned from was meant to be a bad end for Katarina. Now that I realized that, I shuddered. That was bad. My attention was so caught up with the dark magic gang, I didn't even think to keep an eye out for doom flags. How could I have put myself in so much danger? Katarina Clays the Villainess still has plenty of doom flags waiting for her. I'd better brace myself. "All right, I'll give it my all," I said, clenching my fists. When they saw this, my friends all seemed worried again. "Big sis, I don't really get it, but I think you should just rest for what's left of today. Lady Katarina, you must be quite tired. Please get some proper rest. I also think you had better go to bed early." Partway through our journey, Mary and Sophia got out of the carriage. When we got back to the manor, I was thinking of having a mental meeting to work out how to combat doom flags, but I ended up resting instead. It's not like my tired brain could come up with any good ideas anyway. Let's have that meeting once my mind is refreshed. After I changed and climbed into bed, it turned out that everyone was right about me being tired, and I lost consciousness within seconds. I heard peals of screams in the distance as I slowly regained consciousness in pitch darkness. I looked around to see that my surroundings had changed drastically. I could tell that a good deal of time had passed. Just how long has it been since then? How long was I asleep? And what happened while I was gone? I gathered my bearings and wove together my body. What happened there? What were those screams? I rose up above the ground to go and see for myself. I had a promise to keep.